There we go. Well, guys, that was a quick start. Welcome to Fiddler's Green podcast number 68. The year that perished, the year ahead. As you can tell, from my reaction time, I'm a little bit under the weather. That's an understatement. I think I'm feeling quite under the weather, but I couldn't postpone this. So we're just doing it live. I've had this flu-like symptom for at least 10 days, and it is kind of crazy. And in that time, I've been kind of trying to kill time. Uh, I've been working, right? But at night, me and my wife have been rewatching Twin Peaks, and it's kind of amazing actually how well the series has held up. And there's the original series from the 1990, and then there's the Return to Twin Peaks from 2025. Actually, really kind of phenomenal artifacts of an era, and it did show you at least. I mean, it's kind of remarkable. I usually think of culture dying around 2013, 2014. But this show, it came out between 2015 and 2017, and it is still fresh. It is still David Lynch is at the top of his game, and he was in his declining years at that point, and he was making great television in 2017, and surprisingly relevant too. It's it's amazing that Twin Peaks can exist in an era of the iPhones and still kind of make sense. For those who might not be aware, Twin Peaks is kind of a surrealistic mystery store. It's kind of bizarre. Originally, it was created in the 1990s, and it was David Lynch's attempt to kind of do a takeoff on the concept of the soap opera. And in this, he kind of mixed elements of comedy and pastiche along with surrealism, which was kind of what gave the show everyone kind of remembers it for this kind of surrealistic horror aspect that bubbles underneath the entire show at the time. And of course, this has been endlessly made fun of. And then they created a series, initially 2 seasons in the 90s, and then they re-released it in where they made the third season 25 years later. And it's a brilliant piece of television, actually. And it's remarkable, I guess. To me, I'm just watching this and thinking to myself, people say that the iPhone killed culture. People say that you can't make interesting things in a digital age, but I don't know. I think you can. Perhaps this was obviously it was a boomer piece of media. David Lynch was a boomer himself. They were making this as a send off of a pre-existing franchise. It wasn't a remake, but it had the same kind of remake. It had a pre-existing audience. But I don't know. I'm watching Twin Peaks: The Return in 2025, 2026 on New Year's and thinking this just feels amazingly relevant. Insofar as that all of Twin Peaks is essentially about the American dream collapsing in on itself, being kind of taken over by forces beyond their control. Hopefully now my audio is fully on. I can see that it's on here. But anyway, that's notwithstanding. I think everyone's enjoying it. My wife and we lived in Washington when we got married, and I don't know. It's kind of a special treat on our honeymoon. I rented a room in the hotel from Twin Peaks in Snoqualmie, Washington, with the big waterfall and all that stuff. And I was walking through the hotel, and it's all wooden. That's what it's known for, right? It's known for that kind of wooden interior. And I'm like, this is like Twin Peaks. And my wife was like, oh, what is Twin Peaks? And I'm like, I showed her one episode of it. She didn't understand it at all. But now we're finally kind of rewatching it, and she's getting really into this surrealism. And what's so funny is that she was going through the store today, and and she was approached by a really weird looking dwarf who smiled at her in a strange way. And she suddenly started having flashbacks to the scenes from Twin Peaks where Cooper goes into the Black Lodge and is visited by the dwarf from another place. And it's all these little things. I think that it is indicative of the times. It was indicative that David Lynch had his hands on the pulse of something that was occurring that you couldn't see underneath the surface. So in the original Twin Peaks, the drama that's going on, the main driver behind the plot is, and maybe I'm reading into this too much, but the idea, you're watching essentially a soap opera, and everyone in the movie, everyone in the TV show thinks they're in a soap opera. But unbeknownst to them, there's a darker spiritual force moving in the background that's destroying their lives. So, not to, obviously, in the background of Twin Peaks itself, is that all the young people are kind of on drugs, or they're being swept up into this sort of modern crime culture. Also in the background is the rising kind of degeneracy, the fallout from the 60s. The villain that appears kind of as a spiritual entity is obviously a takeoff on Charles Manson or these other kind of high profile serial killers. And so what Twin Peaks is kind of David Lynch's subconscious understanding that the idyllic American town that seemed to have escaped the ravages of the 60s and 70s, and that was kind of carrying on like America was still a thing, was in the process of being devoured by darker forces underneath. And, obviously in 2017, it's almost like the devils that were in the background in the original Twin Peaks are now moving around openly. And the show it's not sort of a comedy married to a darker murder mystery. It is itself just almost kind of pure horror in a way. And, with some surrealistic comedy elements because it's David Lynch, of course. But anyway, this is neither here nor there. Just kind of a meditation on the topic of tonight, which might be a shorter talk. Obviously, with my voice kind of giving out a little bit, it might have to be. But I'm trying to look back on the year 2025 and kind of figure out what was there, what ultimately happened in it. And it feels strange, right? Because we are sitting in the middle right now as we speak. We're sitting in the middle of a huge upheaval. Just this last week, there was essentially, a miniature war. I don't know what you want to call it. A surgical strike that essentially changed the regime of Venezuela, which has been a major thorn in the side of the American security state for 25 years now. Since the 2000s, at least since 2001, that's been a thorn in the side of the American security apparatus. And now, just like that, it's gone. And almost immediately after, there's a huge insurrection brewing up in Minnesota. And this time, it's just, the chips are down. And I guess I'm getting ahead of myself, but I might as well just kind of go for it. It's happening right now. What's occurring is essentially a key piece of the Democratic political machine is falling apart. Now, as it's wont to do, as it's programmed to do, when the Democratic political machine is having problems, all of the NGOs kick into action and usually kick off some kind of happening, some kind of big riot, usually focused around race or whatnot. And this gives Democratic political coalition or Democratic politicians or political operatives room to kind of bury their dead bodies, ask for more gibs, get more payouts, shore up their base. And everyone remembers 2020, how this worked with George Floyd. It literally took place in the exact same city. It had a racial dimension to it that this latest shooting against an activist did not. But I don't know, did it need to have a racial dimension to it? There's already a racial dimension going on in most Minnesota politics. So I don't know if it really needs to have a racial dimension just inserted in explicitly, or if it needs to have that as part of the central crime that inspires it, because there's something organic about any of this. A crime happens in Minnesota, the Democratic political machine is under threat, and therefore there has to be a series of riots. That's just what the machine does. But unlike in 2020, where the Trump administration was behaving like an ordinary regime, an ordinary false regime. It was behaving like an ordinary Republican administration. It was behaving like it was just the other party of the American government, the Republicans. This time, in this iteration of Trump, although it hasn't gone nearly far enough, the Trump administration understands that it is oppositional to the American deep state. And furthermore, it understands that extended periods of anarchy are totally unacceptable and are in fact a destabilizing element. They are a strike against the legitimacy of the regime itself. And under these conditions, I don't know what to say. If Tim Walz and Jacob Frey think that they're just going to fly a kind of miniature version of the summer of love, the winter of love, under the radar of the federal government, they have got another thing coming. I don't think the Trump administration is nearly strong enough as it needs to be to take on the American deep state. But I don't think anyone in that administration is about to compromise with a giant riot, especially a riot that's targeting their federal officers. This is not Trump as a lame duck. This is a Trump as a newly emergent political force, or a relatively new one. And so, I don't know, something is going to be decided in the next 2 days that show us exactly what the year ahead is going to actually contain. What What questions are we going to be answering about what happened? And we can't say anything about it because the ball is still up in the air. My guess with all of this in Minnesota is that this is going to be a major blow for the Democratic Party. Is it going to have an impact on the American deep state, the powers that are behind the Democratic Party? That's harder to say. And this has sort of been what made 2025 such an interesting year. It was just, and this is kind of the topic of this. What did we learn? What did we learn this last year? Because I mean, it felt like more than any of the other years in the 2020s, we had a series of years from 2021 on. I mean, 2020 and 2021, we definitely learned something about the nature of power. That was kind of when the core predictions of the realist schools and NRX and Curtis Yarvin, they kind of came into fruition. You could see the deep state operating in 2020 and 2021. But then we had this huge limbo period that was the Biden administration, where we saw the deep state in total control in many ways, trying to prosecute its enemies, but not being able really to govern the post-COVID America. And as such, the left just started bleeding credibility, bleeding soft power as it tried to reassert its ordinary tools for control. And they ultimately failed, and they ultimately led to the emergence of the second Trump administration. And I don't think we really had a lesson. We could observe things that went on during this period. Discourse started to die in 2021. It started becoming ridiculous to have debates. And I went from being somebody who's kind of admired for having debates for being someone that kind of got laughed at for doing debates. There were kind of seen as it was beneath me to talk to progressives because, and it was not surprising to see why the quality of the progressive debate sphere went down precipitously. They all became like Destiny or worse. It was impossible to have a sincere engagement. No one was interested in anything. They were just there to sell an entertainment product. And so, discourse died in 2021. Hope diminished. No one believed in the American economy anymore. And, the boomer dream kind of died in that period. But at the same time, I didn't really feel like there were a lot of lessons that just hopped off the page and kind of forced me to recognize them the way there were in 2025. I feel in many ways 2025 was trying to teach people something, or it was signaling sort of another turn in this path that we're on. Obviously, the first big turn was 2021. That was the turn away from a culture war into a crisis of the American political order. The culture war very much boiling underneath it, but the culture war didn't really exist in a real dialectic way. In the early 2020s, it was more or less performative. Whereas I think, when you look at 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, those are the culture war in a dialectic form at a boiling point. This is after Gamergate. There's a huge swath of the population that is genuinely undecided between the progressive side and the non-progressive side of the culture war. And furthermore, the way that the progressive mainstream uses its power and controls it is predominantly through dialogue and culture. And they still have to use those tools to maintain control. They don't just lean on the algorithm. And so this creates the late 2010s as this highly unstable cultural period, and the early 2020s as being this incredibly, you know, deracinated cultural period. Nothing interesting happens from 2020 to 2025 culturally. Almost nothing. It's kind of amazing. And I don't know if the trend has really changed, but I can't think of any really phenomenal movies. There's a few horror movies here and there, but it's really hard to think of them. But now I feel like we've come to another turn and we're seeing the beginning of something different. Um, And I don't know if I'm going to do news stories. There are a variety of news stories that came up in 2025. But the first thing I think that really caught my eye, which was, I mean, obviously, when we entered into 2025, we knew Trump had won. Now the question is, what would that mean? Most people predicted that if Trump won in 2024 and became president in 2025, the left would go into immediate Antifa mode. There would be this major backlash from the press. There would be, they would, everyone on the right wing would have an identity crisis. And then the left would be invigorated with a new purpose. And so we saw, when we were voting for Trump or hoping Trump would win, some of us weren't American. I am American. My wife is not. But when we were observing the 2025 elections, we very much understood that Trump was a double-edged sword. He makes the problems with the deep state less imminent, while at the same time, he will solidify the left and give it new purpose and revivify, in many ways, the culture war. But then Trump got elected, he got sworn in, and nothing happened. There wasn't a revivification of the resistance. They just kind of mulled around and moaned online. The entire left totally ran out of energy, and there was this massive confusion that gripped, in particular, the center left, but also the radical left as well. The identity crisis hit them first. Strangely enough, they could see that they were out of power, but they couldn't come up with any narrative about what they were really for. The left seemed to have been mortally wounded by events that occurred in the 2020s. A lot of them were just essentially cultural overreach. They overplayed their hand. They mistook the gains they got from hard power with the kind of gains they would get from soft power. And so they assumed that they had won a lot of support that they had just basically generated through shenanigans and algorithmic generation. And so they hadn't done a lot of the work to actually figure out how they could exist in sort of a post-cultural, post-discourse age. They had lost a lot of demographics they thought they had locked up and didn't really know how to position themselves. And their coalition was incredibly, incredibly brittle. And as I pointed out in an essay, I wrote an essay, How Progressivism Died, and many other people did this year as well. None of their ideological understandings of how the world worked or the core issues that should animate people, whether they were the idea of continuous progress, whether they were the idea of class warfare, or of a war between the sexes, or a war to end racism. None of those tropes worked anymore. That they were fundamentally running up against realities that made it impossible for the left to come up with any kind of narratives that would kind of bring their elite side and coalition them properly with their activist side. Now, I don't want to downplay the fact that the big elephant in the room, obviously, is the ongoing war between Israel and Gaza. The infamous October 7th war, whatever we want to call it here. This essentially created the shock that made the existing contradictions of the left immediately apparent. But it's very difficult to be intellectually honest and on the left at all, basically, or at least the white left, as I might want to call it. And when I say, oh, the left is dying or progressivism is dying, and I keep on having to make this clarification, there will be a force of progress or a force of antinomianism, as we might call it, that will be more or less immortal. The force, chaos is indestructible, entropy is indestructible, everything burns, everything rots from the head down. And there are hordes and hordes and hordes of populations in the West, in Europe, in America, that want nothing more than to essentially make sure the civilization dies so they can feed on its carcass. that is absolutely going to be a force in the coming age. So there will be a left, but it will not resemble the left of the 20th century. The left that fought for this optimistic future, the kind of future that you would imagine white progressives dreaming of, John Lennon's Imagine. That kind of left, the kind of well-to-do technocratic left, that at the same time was the same force as the radical left in a lot of important ways. There's not two lefts in that sense. That is what's dying. And it's not, and the obvious thing about all of this, it's dying ideologically, it's dying religiously. It is not dying in terms of the power it wields. The progressive ideology is still the religion of the American deep state, is still the religion of, I repeat myself, but it is still the religion of the European ruling class. This has not changed. There are still huge numbers of NGOs, of colleges, of professors that are essentially dedicated to this religion, to this ideology. There's armies of activists that are still dedicated to this ideology, and a lot of them are out there tonight rioting or trying to have an insurrection against the federal government. But the problem is they can wield power and they can hold on to their religion, but their religion doesn't make any sense in the modern world. It's fundamentally flawed. And so the future of white progressivism is just going to be to bleed and to bleed and to bleed. And the only alternative is going to be to essentially tighten the screws on hard power. And I think you saw this initially just in the reactions with Trump, but then continuously every month I was thinking, this is the month where the left is going to get its shit together and it's going to come back in force. When is BreadTube going to get off its feet? When is like that was I actually thought that if Trump won, BreadTube would find its balls, come back into the fore as a popular media piece, right? Obviously, Trump is not a very, I'm not going to mince words here. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for people. But I mean, when you're the president, you have to handle the disaster of the insolvent American empire. The American empire is in a solvency crisis. There are no easy answers. There are no fix everything buttons. I mean, there are fix everything buttons that you could press that would say fix all of America's long-term problems with demographics in terms of, actually enforcing migration laws. People are talking about remigration, all of this stuff. There are all sorts of buttons that you could press. Curtis Yarvin writes about this all the time. How can we fiscally reconfigure America so that it is solvent again? You can do all this stuff, but those actions are not easy. They are tantamount to totally remaking the American government at all levels. So it was inevitable that Trump would get into power and start doing highly unpopular things, like, for instance, cutting USAID. This was, in some sense, cutting USAID was both a small thing and a large thing. It was a minuscule part of the American deep state. It was a very small toe of the larger apparatus. But when Trump or Doge or whatever started going in and destroying that, it was like the first time a Republican president had actually hurt the government that FDR had built. And it created this immune reaction through the system that sent Democrats and other members of the deep state into total confusion. They knew for the first time that regime change was possible. And so, Trump can do these things. And Trump is in this very weird position where the first Trump administration was trying to be just a better Republican administration, a genuinely populist Republican administration. And this Trump administration is doing this kind of halfway, I want to remake the American deep state, halfway, we just want to be good government conservatives. And that doesn't really work. I mean, it does work in the sense that for the first 6 months, it totally caught the deep state off guard. They could do nothing to stop it. And this created a dynamic that kind of showed up progressivism. Like I said before, I thought to myself, okay, well, he's going to start making these cuts. He's not going to change the government, which he did not. And these cuts are going to be deeply unpopular. Therefore, this will be the perfect opportunity for an anti-Trump movement on the left to gain broad popularity. Maybe BreadTube will not find its balls again, especially if it's cut them off, as many BreadTubers have. Maybe it won't find its balls again, but there'll be a new resistance movement. And it just never happened. Trump lost popularity in the polls, to be sure, not as much as people thought he would. And the administration just went on. And, this is another lesson here. I mean, I'm probably not the person that needs to hear this, but I think the temperature globally kind of went up with the second Trump administration. Trump has sort of tirelessly tried to end the wars that were started in the Biden administration, whether they were in Gaza or whether they were in Ukraine. And I think Gaza has shown some possibility of ending. I don't know. Again, it looks like it's started again, but again, fog of war. Who knows what's going on there? The Ukraine war shows no sign of abating, and I guess this just shows you. I mean, I had my druthers. I am a complete peacenik on the Ukraine side of the conflict. I want that war to stop. I want this giant meat grinder in Eastern Europe to stop. I want new borders, a new Iron Curtain, a new Cold War that doesn't constantly threaten to go hot. It's horrific. And I think Trump wants that too. But the thing is, what's causing all of these wars is the fact that everyone can kind of see that America is in this state of limbo. And as such, it doesn't make any sense for them to stop these wars. As long as Putin thinks that he can gain territory, which he is, he's going to push and push and push and push and push. And as long as Zelensky thinks that he can extract more money from the American deep state, which he can, he is going to suck and suck and suck and suck and suck. And this is true for everything. The wars abroad and the destabilization, they do represent genuine geopolitical conflicts, but they're really just everyone realizing that Pax America has a timer attached to it. And so they better get as much stuff as possible while the money train's still going. Putin better grab up as much land as he can before the political situation changes in America. And Zelensky and any other client in America better absorb as much as they can, better absorb as much money as they can. And these wars, these conflicts between Israel and Palestine, I mean, we look at the Israeli-Palestinian war, and I think this is a fundamental miscalculation on the part of Israel, or at least I think it is. I think Israel believed that the Gaza war was necessary at this stage. Obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu needed the Gaza war to shore up his political prospects internally. And then there's that dimension of it too. But I think that Israel felt that they needed to tie up this loose end while they still had America on side, or America willing to pay out for their expenses. Now, I don't think that Israel quite understood what they lost from across these last 2 years doing this. They have completely lost the West in an indelible way too. I know, for instance, I think leftists have notoriously low attention spans. I wouldn't be surprised that if this war stops, that a lot of them will just get amnesia and forget that they were ardent anti-Zionists for 3 years in their 20s. But insofar as the right goes, insofar as the right wing goes, the timing of this war just could not be worse. Uh, Israel completely destroyed its narrative credibility among mainstream America. Insofar as that there, after the boomer generation dies, there are basically no organic Zionist support for Israel anymore. And I think Israel is going to look back and wonder why the hell it did this. It tied up a loose end. It consolidated their domestic political crisis, and it made their foreign crisis almost untenable. And I don't know, but I mean, this is the logic though, and what's driving Netanyahu's insane logic is the fact that he understands that the status quo is not lasting. We're in a mode of limbo. So politics isn't over, history isn't over. I mean, this is one of the reasons why progressivism is dying, is because as these conflicts rage on, sure, most non-white young people are kind of naturally progressives. They're naturally antagonists of the heritage American people, typically represented by the white Republican Party. They sympathize with the Palestinians by and large. And that is something that, that's something that galvanizes the progressive movement to an extent, or at least the radical progressive movement. It separates them from their funding. But more fundamentally, as it becomes apparent that these conflicts between the Palestinians and the Gazans are interminable, or that the conflicts or the coherency of places like Ukraine are suddenly really important for the left, the narrative that we're in some kind of post-national future, the Francis Fukuyama understanding of the world, that dies away. And I think, obviously, what are we all like, Bill Clinton here? What are we all, does these globalists, most of the left is not globalist, but at the same time, it kind of has to be. It kind of has to believe at the end of the day that we're inevitably moving forward in progress in time, and that there are some things that are truly behind us. Specifically, questions of identity are truly behind us. And, that's, it's an interesting dynamic, because the other thing I noticed in getting into sort of the summer of 2025, I am going off of a note sheet I wrote here, just about the various things that kind of came to mind. The internet. I've made, I think, 1,000 articles or videos on this, not 1,000. This is what we're coming up on episode 70 of this podcast, but I talk about this periodically. It's hard to remember what the internet once was, or what social media once was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, social media was everything. It was the most exciting place to be. And these days, after the 2020s, after the change that happened in 2021, the internet has been getting more boring, more slopified. And I kind of began realizing this in the summer of 2025. Again, here we are. We're right in the middle of one of the most consequential political shakeups. I mean, again, is it American regime change? No. But it is one of the more consequential political shakeups of our entire lives. And maybe, that's kind of damning it with faint praise. We have until this time lived through a very stable period of history. But we lived through an incredible shakeup. And what did we have? Did we have a summer that was like the summer of 2017 or 2016? Was it like Gamergate circa 2014, 2015? Was it like the upheaval of 2019 and all of the crazy stuff that was going on there online. Everyone had a political opinion. A lot of them were shit, but there are people who actually were there because people wanted to have a political worldview. 2025 happens, the greatest political upset of our lives, at least in America, and even in Britain. Even in Britain, you have the return of labor and the absolute shit show that was. The European governments have never been weaker. I guess their censorship regimes have been stronger. But you roll around to summer of 2025, you're expecting riots, you're expecting political action, you're expecting people to be talking about things on the internet, and you get nothing. You get the big political influencer of 2025 online was Asmongold, which, as far as I can tell, is like a repeat of PewDiePie. It's the same deal. Like he plays video games. He has non-progressive politics, and every now and again, he hints that his non-progressive politics might have a little bit of a right-wing tinge to them, but that's pretty much it. And on the left, your big political personality was Dean Withers. Dean Withers. He had the political personality of a turnip. The guy is 27, and it looks like his balls haven't descended yet. He is designed to be a TikTok influencer. He's designed to be a heartthrob for girls. It's not serious politics. And then what I should say is this is one thing that's different from 2025 to the before times. You started realizing very quickly in 2025 the kind of cost you had of engaging in non-serious politics. So, for instance, in 2017, when I had my YouTube channel, it was more or less new. Or late 2017, I started doing debates with progressives like Christy Winters, and I would do response videos to them. I would put together debates, and when I did that debate with Christy Winters, I went to my university library. I got all of these sources and books and cited them. I really prepared for that debate. Even though Christy Winters was like a troll, this was not a serious person. There was no serious ideas behind this philosophy. Case in point, I think the moderator of our debate was this weird Russian polyamorous couple, for which shortly afterwards, one of the polycule members murdered the other one. These were deeply, deeply flawed people. Yet, in the before times of the internet, because a lot of people were watching it, that meant it was important. And so did it matter whether it was stupid? Well, you had to advance your serious ideas against the stupid ideas, because that was how the internet worked, baby. And if you could make a name for yourself in politics, then you could advance your ideas. The same thing's not true in 2025. You have Jubilee, you have Dean Withers, you have all of these little sound bites. You have, the good example was Mehdi Hassan on Jubilee. This occupied, I think, about an entire week of discourse, was this absolute asshat, Mehdi Hassan, who came on the Jubilee podcast and debated a bunch of right-wingers. And he caught a few of them out basically being bad at debate, I guess. There was one guy who was, I think he was a graper or something, and he repeated some line about wanting monarchy, and Mehdi Hassan mocked him for that or whatever. I think Sarah Stock was there as well, who became a personality shortly afterwards. But okay, you're having a debate against Mehdi Hassan. Let's say you beat him. And a matter of fact, Mehdi Hassan's Jubilee appearance was notable in that they had done about 10 or 20 of these liberals versus conservative circular debates across 2 years. That's what Jubilee does. And the Mehdi Hassan debate was one of the few ones where the progressive side looked like it had come out on top, mainly because of just bad optical management by a few people on the panel going up against Mehdi Hassan. Okay, great. So you have this back and forth. I guess the progressives win it. What point is there arguing against Mehdi Hassan? I mean, again, you can talk about the Jubilee debate, but shortly after the Jubilee debate, you have Mehdi Hassan, who presented himself as this super moderate person, this very, very liberal person, just sort of liberally engaging in anti-white, anti-Christian diatribes online. In the debate stage, he doesn't know anything about replacement migration, about he thinks that wherever you're born or wherever you have the passport, that's where you're from. That's if you have a passport to Britain, then you're as British as anybody, and you have an American passport, you're as American as anybody. And then you see him in another clip, and he's talking about his deep connections to Islam and Pakistan and all this stuff, and and his deep association with the South Asian community and all this bullshit. Throw in a few anti-white diatribes in there, and you have another guy, another incredibly similar person, the Wajat Ali guy, giving a huge anti-white diatribe for like 15 minutes. And you kind of realize, okay, like, do you need me to debunk this? This guy's obviously lying. As a matter of fact, just me sitting up here and having a discourse with a guy who's just like, your culture is shit, your race is shit, your history is shit, and we're going to replace you. Great. We'll have a debate with that. And in the debate, you'll pretend like you're a Barack Obama liberal. And then right when the debate ends, you're going to go back to insane gloating and racialized statements of racial supremacy and just this weird demonic, I don't know whether this demonic animus against people of Gentile European origin. I know where this comes from. It comes from the education system. But, and again, like I've known this, I've been on the internet for a long time. And I think I've seen for whatever reason, among South Asians in particular, among South Asian Muslims in particular, they're very fond of this kind of like gloating, like where they're gloating about how they like this, they like to, first they want to concern troll you and act like they're your best friend. Then in the middle, they'll gloat about how they're going to replace you, how they hate your culture, they hate your race, your oppressors, and you're going to get what's coming to you. And then they'll circle around, they'll forget they said that, and then they'll go back to concern trolling you again and pretending like they're your therapist. This is not something that's new. This is a pattern. There was Mehdi Hassan, there was Ali, there was a few other people too. I'm sure if you wanted to go into a blast from the past, you could pull up other people. I think Tariq Ramadan used to do this. I don't want to say Reza Aslan did that because he's too much of a shit lib, but this is a whole genre of people who engage in this kind of gloating. And it's not that it happens. I know it happens. I'm not surprised about this. Again, I've been on the internet for a long time. I've seen this happening for a decade. But just being in dialogue with it is fundamentally, to play the game is to lose it. I'm glad it exists as an artifact. I'm glad people can see it and internalize what this means. But what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to sit there and argue that my collectivity shouldn't go extinct. I guess it's not just South Asian Muslims that say this sort of stuff. You hear this stuff coming from people like Andrew Gold too, apparently. You hear this coming from a variety of people in the Jewish community, even though they pretend to be conservatives. You hear this all over the place in among progressive women. We hate you. We want you to go extinct. And I'm supposed to be in dialogue with this. Being in dialogue with this, like being in dialogue with Dean Withers, is just an exercise in self-humiliation. I mean, sure, look, if someone is sincerely struggling with these ideas, if you're sincerely struggling with an ideology that commends your civilization just destroy itself, by all means, come on the channel and I'll walk you through the arguments. I'll be patient. I consider myself to be a teacher. But I'm not going to pretend that these people like Mehdi Hassan or Andrew Gold are engaging in, or Dean Withers or Vosh. I can't keep on pretending that this is a debate. This is an entertainment product where people laugh at how you're futilely struggling against this impossible rhetorical problem. They know the situation. They think they're going to win, and they want to just kind of watch you battle against it. Uh, it's futile, and I keep on thinking back. Oh, is this some famously BreadTube didn't like debating the right wing? Did they have a similar sense to this? I guess maybe. Uh, I'm still interested in talking to progressives. I'm just not interested. I want to know what they believe. I want to know what their internal dialogue is. I want to feel how their will is oriented because I want to see what their sincere beliefs are. So I guess I'm not like BreadTube just shutting the doors on debate. I'm not like, or should I say, I'm not like BreadTube of 2017 shutting the doors on debate. But at the same time, I don't see the point of this anymore. I mean, you could fast forward. I'm going to kind of go ahead a little bit. Just the biggest moment of this year for me was in October. It was September. It was September 12th, right? It was September 12th. And Charlie Kirk gets shot. And this was just after Irina Zarutska died. Irina Zarutska gets on a bus and gets stabbed by a vagrant. And the reason why she gets stabbed on a vagrant is essentially she does not have the kind of she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But let's be honest, she was from Europe and she did not understand that getting on a bus in certain areas is a very dangerous thing for people to do in America, which is why Americans use transportation a lot more sparingly than do Europeans. When you use public transportation in certain areas like Charlotte in America, you have to have situational awareness, which is a euphemism for saying that you have to have a certain amount of racial awareness. You don't want to sit with your back to a young man of African persuasion who seems like he's in the middle of having a drug episode, a drug-induced psychotic episode. You have to be aware of these demographic features of the bus. You can't just sit down and scroll your phone. It's not Ukraine. This isn't Kiev. So, did I use the right pronunciation for that? I don't even really care. I feel like that's politicized at this point. That happens. And then Charlie Kirk gets shot. And this is another point in this whole collapse where you're looking on. And there are the TikTok videos where half of, I don't know, TikTok isn't BreadTube, but what would be BreadTube if modern progressives had attention spans that were over 60 seconds is on TikTok, and half of them were celebrating his death. And then the other half of the progressives, the Ezra Kleins of the world, decided to have big debates with other dim-witted progressives like Ta-Nehisi Coates about whether celebrating Charlie Kirk's life or mourning his death was a bad thing. Which is, do you want to have a country? And Ta-Nehisi Coates is talking like Charlie Kirk, as if Charlie Kirk were like George Lincoln Rockwell. Like this is Charlie Kirk is the new iteration of George Lincoln Rockwell, and the people who apologize for him are using white politeness to apologize for white supremacy. This is absolutely insane. Charlie Kirk is a standard Republican. He represents the ideas of 35 to 40% of the population and the voting patterns of 51% of the population. He is not radical. One of the Democrats' radical splinter groups, I will say. Because again, I'm still to this day I'm not convinced that Charlie Kirk's assassin operated without knowledge of other people. I don't know, maybe I'm indulging in a conspiracy theory, but things that I have seen have led me to believe that a lot of people on that person's Discord server were probably in on it or knew about it. A radical progressive operative assassinates the most prominent activist of the Republican Party, of the conservative half of the country. And we're treating him like it's the death of George Lincoln Rockwell. What? I mean, there's like, what do you want me to say to this? It's the futility of all of this. It 2025 kind of just, I mean, again, discourse was dying for 5 years, but in 2025, I don't know, there needs to be another reason to talk to people. And there needs to be another reason to have political disagreements. Uh, Certainly, another thing that kind of came up, the banner political product of 2025, the summer at least, was gender slop. People just couldn't get over this war between men and women online. And it started, 2 years ago, it started with people like, I don't know if I want to go over these people's names. There are a variety of people, including Lauren Southern and others, that were formerly right-wing activists that wanted to kick off this big commiseration about how oppressed wives are in their own homes. Husbands they just oppress their wives because men hate women so much. This is when Radfem Hitler really had all of her breakout work. Men just hate women so much. This was the refrain all throughout 2024. And it got louder and louder and louder and louder and louder until in 2025, there was this whole summer where half the pieces on Substack and almost all of the popular pieces on TikTok or YouTube were about gender, and specifically gender slop. There were one gender that was writing about what was wrong with the other gender. I mean, I don't, what's the point of this? And I guess a great example of this, obviously people will say, oh, well, you like some gender slop. People know that I'm kind of fond of the Homath, who does kind of gender slop videos, but I think high quality ones, but definitely ones that kind of point the blame in the direction of women. And this is a great example. Okay, so behind gender slop, there is a real political issue. The real political issue is the absolute decline in family formation and dating culture that has occurred over the last 3 or 4 years in America and in Europe. After COVID, although before COVID, it was going down. During COVID, it just dropped and it never returned. And this is a major vector for declining birth rates and the disintegration of our societies. There are women in particular, and a lot of men, who do nothing but write about gender all day, every day on Substack. There's another article about gender. There's another article about gender, one after another after the other. People like Radfem Hitler have entire careers where all they do is tweet about what's wrong with the other sex. My particular favorite one is Cartoons Hate Her. Again, like married woman, technically a moderate. She's one of the most popular writers on Substack. And all she writes about are the problems between men and women. Okay, great. So after writing about this day in and day out, day in and day out, day in and day out, has any solution been given? Like, could I invite you on the podcast? And Cartoons Hate Her does get invited on a lot of podcasts. But say, for instance, I were to invite Cartoons Hate Her on the podcast. And I was just, I build it as, what are the top 5 things we can do as a society to fix the dating market? Cartoons Hate Her would have nothing to say. She'd have a series of complaints about how people behaved online, in particular how men behaved online, in particular how people dubbed incels behave online. But there would be no operative plan for how to fix this. In order to have a plan to fix the dating relationship market, you would actually have to take actions, and those actions would have to constrain the decisions and choices of, well, in this case, women, which is something that the gender slop monger, the slop monger, the gender slop monger can't countenance. Their audience doesn't want to hear anything about ethics. They don't want to hear anything about principles. And they certainly don't want to hear about how choices they think belong to them need to be sacrificed for the larger goal of actually solving a large societal problem. So in this whole summer, where almost it felt like almost no one was writing about anything else. Well, I guess there were lots of articles about how the world was ending from technology or from war or whatever. But of the content that pertained to culture, we experience in our ordinary life, an enormous amount of it was just this gender slop constantly. And you realize this is conversations that you participate in. They're just products. They're not actually trying to resolve a question. Now, again, oh, David, what are you talking about? All political content online is just a product. Well, yes, but when I ask questions or try to get learnings about what's happened and what will happen in the next year, I'm asking these questions to actually materially move towards a conclusion. I am asking about what we learned from the summer of gender slop so that we don't repeat the summer of gender slop. Not so that I can go back to the drawing board and churn out more gender slop articles, or conversely, churn out more anti gender slop articles. And I guess, for this reason, there's just a sense of exhaustion around all of these areas. With race, people were talking about. Uh, I don't know whether I wanted. People were talking about racial exhaustion. Let's say, scholar exhaustion. There was just also this exhaustion in my own end. I just didn't want to engage with these female content creators in particular that just couldn't stop talking about gender. It was just, I've said everything that I can say. All of the propositions are on the table. The levers that could fix these things are also on the table. And no one wants to pull them. They just want to endlessly relitigate these things because it drives the algorithm. I just can't do it anymore. We have to talk about things that actually matter. And the culture war isn't one of them. As much as again, if you want me to talk to somebody who's from the other side of the culture war in an educational capacity, and we're just trying to lay out, excuse me, we're trying to lay out our positions and figure out what each of us believes and actually having a dialectic. I think that could be educational for a lot of people. We could actually learn something. But that's not what's going on. No one is having these conversations. These are from a different era. And the real conversations, the real things that are moving the needle forward are occurring elsewhere. They're not they are, I guess you could say, broadly culture war issues. But they are not they're more existential issues. They're more questions of identity. And then now I think we get kind of to the post Charlie Kirk era of 2025. And those are the three periods, right? There was the ascendancy of Trump and the elimination of USAID when you figured out that the progressive God was not indestructible and that the American empire was crumbling. There was the summer where we realized that basically culture war discourse was slop. And then that was kind of ended with the death of Charlie Kirk, because at that point, good Lord, what are you even doing thinking you're having dialogue at that stage? What are you doing? The dialogue guy literally gets his throat blown out on live internet feed. what are you doing anymore? It signaled the end of an era. And then after Charlie Kirk's death, there's just a bunch of like propositions on the table. And the propositions really are kind of the form. Okay, so dialogue is over. The American empire is ending. Prosperity, I mean, also in fall, in summer and in fall, the economy started getting really, really bad. The economic downturn started happening in earnest. A lot of people are suffering economically. Prices are out of control. Sustainability is just economic sustainability for the middle class is obviously a thing of the past. We're declining. There's no point talking about the culture anymore. So now what appears to us are just like these series of questions. Everyone's going to keep on doing what they're doing. So what are you going to do about it? Okay. So apparently an enormous amount of the new immigrant population we've let in is just scamming the system. They're scamming the system with fake resumes, with fake schools, with fake healthcare. And okay, right now, in this moment, in December of 2025, the focus was on Somalia, but you could just as easily pick any other group. And in the middle of them scamming us, influencers from their community are just making videos where they face the camera and tell Americans, but really, we know what they mean. They mean white people. They tell white Christians how much they hate us, just blithely. I brought this up the last time I covered the Wahaji Ali video where he tells white people he hates their culture, he hates their history. It's all shit. And we're going to replace you. Uh, when would anybody say this? Think back to all of the colonization that went from the Europeans on, the Europeans displaced the Indians, the Ellis Islanders followed the Wasps, and there was some ethnic displacement there. And my own ancestors coming, did my father become a citizen? I don't know, the 70s or 80s maybe from Canada, and from Canada previously from Eastern Europe. At what point would any of those new American immigrants tell the previous generation of Americans that their culture was shit, their race was shit, and they should be fine with their own extinction? Again, I'm sure some incredibly bigoted people said that in the 19th century to Native Americans, but those would be some seriously, seriously depraved people that would have such a lack of courtesy to denigrate the dignity of even a defeated people, even a people that most of American society thought in the 19th century was an inferior culture. Even they would recognize that that was a debased communication. And now you hear that from BBC journalists. Now you hear that from New York Times op-ed writers. Just straight up at the camera, I hate your guts, white America. I hate your guts, Christian America. And there's no dialogue. So, okay, what are you going to, it's like this, you're not being confronted about this as if it's a dialogue. You're being confronted by this the same way you're confronted with the reality of Somalian scammers. It's just a reality. It's just a reality. A large percentage of the professional class in America hate white people. A large amount of the new immigrants that have been admitted in the last 10 years are scamming our welfare systems for enormous amounts of money. For enormous amounts of money. It's hard to kind of come up with words to describe this. So Nick Shirley goes. We'll revisit this, right? Everyone knows what I'm talking about. There's a viral video out on the internet by this content creator called Nick Shirley, where he goes to Somalian daycare and healthcare providers. And so in Minnesota, this is all in Minnesota, I should say. This is all in Minneapolis, St. Paul area, I believe. How could it be anywhere else? But again, this area, this municipality, and this state, they're very generous states. And he goes to these Somalian daycare providers or these Somalian healthcare providers. They ask for healthcare, and he's like, no, we don't give you healthcare. Go away, and slams the door. Highly unusual behavior, probably a scam. When was the last time you walked into a healthcare provider and they told you to get out and called the police? They might be a little bit uneasy that you have cameras there, but healthcare providers that are getting government funding aren't supposed to slam the door in your face because you're from the wrong ethnic group. And that's obviously what I mean. And it's not like I'm even making that up. They literally tell him to go away because he's white. You're not supposed to do that. But, what's obviously going on isn't racial discrimination. What's obviously going on is that these healthcare providers aren't really healthcare providers. They're empty rooms that they've rented out so that they can take large quantities of money from the state to treat non-existent problems in their community. And the reason why they're doing this, the reason why they're able to pull this off is that there's an army of NGOs waiting outside of Minneapolis, outside of St. Paul, all across the country. And these NGOs' entire job is to hire young college educated women to go to these communities and be cultural liaisons and help them. How they present it is, do you want to help poor oppressed minority communities get health care? So the NGOs go to these communities and they set them up, and they don't ask questions. They don't make sure that they're actually people being served by these health clinics. They don't make sure that there's actually children at these Somali daycare centers. And there obviously aren't. There obviously aren't. Half these places are empty. The fraud's been known. The fraud's been known. It's not even like Nick Shirley broke this story. We've known about widespread fraud in the state of Minnesota since 2014. What's happened? Has anyone got arrested? Well, apparently not. Apparently they're still scamming. And in the meantime, the government of Minnesota has massively increased the amount of money going to these places. And just to give you an idea about this, it's just the amount of the money. It's just the size of the gib that really just makes you take a step back and feel incredibly demoralized. So you have this school supposedly serving 99 children, and it's raking in like $2 million a month or something like that. $2 million a month. I mean, that's like $2,000 a month per child if every child was there. What does anyone else pay for childcare? I mean, why? Why does anyone pay for childcare? Rich people don't spend $2,000 a month on childcare. This is an enormous amount of money per child. It's an enormous amount of money per child. Why do middle class people rarely spend over $1,000 for childcare a month? And that's for a middle class community where both parents are working and need childcare. And this community is cashing in twice that much, and the children are probably fictional. You had people who were watching each other's children claiming to be childcare professionals and cutting themselves in on salaries that were worth more in toto based on this childcare that they're providing than my own salary working in a tech job. You had people claim that their house was a childcare establishment and got a loan and bought a mansion off government assistance. At some point, it just kind of becomes a reality. Why? Why do I work? Am I an idiot? Am I an idiot going to work every day for 10 hours a day and then having to save, paying for school, paying for after school care sometimes for the child? My friends paying sometimes for 3 or 4 children. Am I an idiot for doing this? Why? Obviously, if I were smart, I would just find some way to scam the system and make millions of dollars off this. Because obviously nobody cares. Obviously no one cares this money is missing. Or, why? Why do you go through all of this trouble to start your business when you have these people coming in on H-1B visas and then getting these low interest or interest-free loans and just buying up hotels and gas stations in little ethnic cartels? They're doing the jobs America doesn't want to do. They're taking the opportunities that white America doesn't have. And the timing couldn't be perfect because in the middle of this, one of the last articles of the year, I'm writing a review of it as we speak, but there was a Jacob Savage article. Again, not a very original article about the lost generation. An entire generation of people, the millennials and the Zoomers, that were essentially locked out of upper management positions, of leadership positions, and in particular of creative positions across all industries. You have huge swaths of schools that basically have no white junior professors. The Ivy Leagues, for instance. You have writing rooms that essentially just hired no new white men. You have publishing houses that refuse to read white male manuscripts. You have promotion regimes that refuse to promote white men. I don't know if I've suffered under this, probably not at my current job. But, maybe I did in a sense because all of my life, I always wanted to be a teacher who studied politics and culture and history. That was my big passion. But when I got to college, it was obvious that there was no future for white men in history, culture, politics. I remember this one story, I guess. I don't know, relating this. So I went to school for engineering. And in my spare time, since I was a nerd, I met up with a bunch of grad students from the economics department, and we were going through the great books. We read Aristotle and Plato and Machiavelli and Nietzsche and all of those ones, and some fiction books mixed in there too. That's one of the reasons why I'm pretty well read, is that in on the weekends I would go to those book groups, and I got really I don't know how you want to put it. I wouldn't say that I understood them all. I have a much more mature understanding of something like Machiavelli or Nietzsche now than I did as an undergraduate. But I end up at the end of my undergrad education with an engineering degree, in computer science and mechanical engineering. And in addition to that, I have this knowledge of kind of like the liberal arts. And so as a trait to myself, I take a semester abroad in Germany. And when I take this semester abroad in Germany, almost everyone else who's taking this course on German, I think the course was on EU politics, the politics of the European Union. And it happened to be in Germany. Really, it was like a glorified way to get a European vacation on a discount as a student, which I was really excited to do because I also had studied a little bit of German in high school and practiced some with my grandmother, and I kind of wanted to try it out. And so this was a great opportunity. I suck at it. That was like what? That was like almost 20 years ago. It's embarrassing now. But either way, so I go to Germany with this group, and the group is all history and poli-sci students, and they're all non-white girls. I'm one of the only men in this class. There's 4 other men. And of the women, only one of them, I think, is Caucasian. The rest are Chinese and Filipinos. And so part of this trip, part of this excursion was we had to break up in groups and go to various historic locations and write about the development of European politics. And I'm going on these trips with a bunch of history majors. And I don't know, the fact that they weren't white was kind of interesting too, but I don't know how much to make of it. And we're looking at all these historical monuments, like from Dresden to Leipzig to Freiburg and Aachen and all this stuff, and they know nothing about European history, absolutely nothing. I'm explaining to them what the Rhine was. I'm explaining to them what the 30 Years' War was, like, or the Napoleonic Wars. They can't put this stuff within a century. These are history majors, mind you, and they're just flabbergasted. How do you know all of this stuff? How do you know all of this stuff? I thought you were an engineer. How do you know all this stuff? Well, I don't know. I just read history. And I retained it. How do you not know all of this stuff? This is very basic history. I know you specialized in Filipino history. I know you specialized in the oppression of minorities in the 1960s, but certainly to understand the oppression of minorities in the 19th century, you have to at least understand the political forces that led to that in the 18th century. You have to understand Germany, and you have to understand what England was and the political state of those countries was, and apparently you know none of it. And it's okay, fine. You do the project, you get done, you cash out, you get an A because everyone gets an A in those easy end of your college career courses, whatever. Uh, and then you follow the careers of the people on Facebook, and they just get they get graduate placement in Stanford Law, and then they immediately get added to a prestigious position inside the California government, working for the San Francisco mayor or working for the governor's office. And you're thinking, I was thinking to myself, was I an idiot for picking engineering? Like, why? Why? Right? Like, why did I pick engineering as a topic of studying when I could have taken this path and been like the attaché of of Gavin Newsom or something like that, or a higher up lawyer? And I mean, it was pretty obvious to me that this path that they were following just was not open to me. And it was subtly hinted that it wasn't open to me. But like, you would have never jumped through the hurdles necessary to go to that level of power that they were following. And of course, when they were working for the office of the San Francisco mayor, they were like they were the representatives of the Filipino community. That was their job. That was the reason why they were there. And there's obviously no representative of the white Californian community or whatever, who no one cares about that. Like, fuck that, right? So there, but even then, like, I'm sure there wasn't, this person didn't have any deep connections to Filipino culture. They were they were the most deracinated person of all time, and they got all of these clutch positions. And that was the first time you kind of became aware of the fact that there are just these career trajectories that aren't available to you as a person of a non-diverse background. And as Jacob Savage documented, that was just from 2001 to 2014. That was an increasing number of positions, increasing number of career paths were not open to you. And then after 2014, almost no career paths were open to you. Like, the jaws of professional opportunity for white men just slammed shut, and corporate America decided to essentially radically preferentially hire people of diversity. Uh, and this is sort of the point of the article. Like, there's no point debating this. I mean, you can debate it. No one defends it. Like, no one ever defended this practice. They just did it. They're just doing it to you. They're just doing it to you, and they're daring you to stop it. Excuse me. Still coming down with the flu, so I apologize. I think kind of The last questions that kind of brought the year to the close were questions of identity. This is the famous Piers Morgan versus Nick Fuentes debate. It was kind of a stupid debate, but it was ultimately the Rashomon moment. Uh, Piers Morgan and Nick Fuentes just talked past each other for what was it, almost an entire hour, I think. And the only conclusion you can come to, as a young person, I mean, the reason all the boomers who saw it concluded that Piers Morgan was the winner because he was able to tar Nick Fuentes with all the right labels. He got the incel, he got the misogynist, he got the Nazi. Once you call people three of those things, their career is over. They're never going to work in this town again. Uh, everyone else who had to experience the world after 2014 as a young professional took a much different message from this. The question was not about how istist or ismist the other person was. The question was about identity. Good Lord. All of these sneezes. Excuse me, guys. The question was about identity. Piers Morgan was this deracinated individual. He didn't stand for anything. He claims to be Catholic, and then he's trying to browbeat Nick Fuentes for not having premarital sex. He claims to be some kind of upstanding guardian of good journalism and then harangues people for their relationship with their fathers. And all the time, as opposed to having serious conversations about the things that are happening right now, it's just, how can I tar you with some kind of sob story from the past? How can I get you in the right box, Nick Fuentes? I mean, no, it's just, it's, you arrive on the opposite side of this. And I think this was kind of the right endpoint of 2025. There's just no serious boomer position in the West anymore. I think this is kind of, and I've said this on other podcasts across this year, this is kind of like the last hurrah of serious boomerism, of the boomer truth regime. Now, of course, the boomers still have all of the political power, like the progressives, but their political power, their political formulas make no sense. There's no intellectual defense of them anymore. We just have to see how long they're going to last. How long can we sustain these lies? Because taking them down is too costly for the system to countenance. Excuse me. I think that in the coming year, we're going to be kind of confronting these problems head on. There's going to, at some point, have to be a transition of power away from the boomers, the old boomer white men who run the institution. And it's going to settle on somebody else. And the big question is, who else? The American empire is declining. What can replace it? I think the first question that's really staring us in the face, okay, sure. We are in a post-discourse age. There are some areas of discourse that are still active if you look for them. The important areas of discourse are still happening, albeit in different places. For instance, one dimension of discourse that is still active, one dialectic that's still active in the modern world, is the question over whether boomer power can maintain control, whether the boomer truth regime can sustain itself. It is ultimately doomed. But can it last 2026? A great example, although I'm not involved in this battle at all, is going on in the Protestant churches of America. There is a huge battle between the forces of sort of boomer liberalism or boomer liberal conservatism that you see from somebody like the Babylon Bee crowd, and then the more harder line people like the men who are broadly aligned with Christian nationalism. And you could kind of mix in people like Rod Dreher. There's a similar battle going on inside Catholicism, although as in all things Catholic, the lay people can't really participate in the fight at all in any meaningful way. So we just watch from the sidelines. But in both cases, the results are really obvious to see. You have a young cohort of millennials and Zoomers that are broadly traditionalist and broadly post-liberal. They do not share any kind of specific post-liberalism. They just know that liberalism is over. And then sitting in the places of power, you have the boomer establishment that is trying everything it can do to suppress them. The problem is that their political formulas don't work. So when people like, what was it, James White or the Whitebeard guy, or Seth Dillon from the Babylon Bee, or Neil Shenvi, or any of these other people, whenever they go out there and try to make their case against the post-liberals or the Christian nationalists or the woke right people, they make utter fools of themselves. Now, does that disestablish their institutional power in their own ecclesiastical hierarchy? Not at all. They're still members of congregations. They're still very, very popular influencers. But it's a leak. It's a leak. Every time the rhetoric turns over, they make fools of themselves and lose more young people. So what is going to happen as the battle with boomers goes forward and forward and forward is you're going to have a completely geriatric establishment of powerful boomers fighting almost all of their younger activated members inside a single organization. I know who has to win that. Who has to win that eventually are the young people. That's the only people who can win that. They are the next generation. They will win in the future. And the boomers have no ability to contest that. But the battle will rage on until the torch is passed. And in the case of things like conservative Protestantism or evangelicalism, and even when it comes to Catholicism, eventually the torch will be passed. The show must go on. The church must continue its witness. They can't just disestablish themselves. And even if they did, they already have such little power that their fall is not going to be that great. And eventually, being the only show in town, the people who represent the post-liberal version, the anti-boomer version of their ideology, will pick up the pieces and reestablish the institution on the other end of the schism. A more interesting dynamic, I think, has to do with the left. And the left is also experiencing a younger radical side fighting a older established boomer side. And the boomers are the moderates and the liberals, and the young people are all radicals. This is the dynamic. And in some ways, it is a lot like the battle that is going on within mainstream conservatism, a lot like the battle that's going on in the Catholic Church, and a lot like the battle that's going on inside institutional Protestantism writ large. However, the left has a much harder road in this regard. The first problem, their radicals are all either insane men, and I include trans women in that, insane men, hysterical women, and immigrants who are trying to scam the system. This is not a stable coalition. Now, these people, these radicals, they like communism because if they are like Hassan Piker or Zohran Mamdani, they can all pretend to be communists and they can pretend to be co-comrades in the revolution. long enough to try to take over their targets, take over the Democratic Party, maybe take over New York City. But this is not a coherent belief system, and there's no internal coherent belief systems either. It's not like Protestantism or Catholicism, where the interior of the thing, it's experiencing a civil war, but the interior of the thing is coherent, and what's giving it power is the belief of the individual members in that ideology or in that religion. In leftism, it's the entire opposite. The institutions are powerful and they want the institutions. They don't believe in any ideology. Zoran Mamdani isn't a convinced communist. He's he's a nepotist. He wants to make good himself. He's as ideological as Vivek Ramaswamy is. He just wants to get in and grab the bag. And communism is the best excuse for that. The female members of the Democratic Party, are they dyed-in-the-wool Marxists? Are they reading Das Kapital? Are they fanatics for the labor theory of value? Of course not. For them, communism is a cause that gives their life meaning. They don't care about the particulars. And also, they like it because it shows the possibility of paying out. And I'm not even going to get into the insane men of the Progressive Coalition because they're almost kind of a self-refuting force. That's not a stable coalition. If they manage to capsize, for instance, in the process of taking over the Democratic Party, if they ruin its funding apparatus so that after they take it over, they have none of their big deep pocket funders anymore, that will be a disaster for the Democrats, because all of the people in their coalition are there to get paid. And once they realize that the thing that they're fighting over is broken, once they realize that the baby they're arguing over has been sawed in half and has no more economic value, they'll lose their interest. And the boomers who are in charge of these institutions know that. They know that there is no future for, well, at least white progressivism after it has been radicalized. They will break the coalition. They will make the party ungovernable. They will make the deep state ungovernable and not cohesive anymore. The main utility, the main benefit of the left is that everybody works together. People kind of instinctively know that moderate leftists, for instance, they instinctively know that they're not supposed to attack radical leftists. Antifa, ostensibly, is communist or anarchist for absolutely no borders and for the abolition of the police. Just the other day, like 2 days ago, in Germany, Antifa or another equivalent radical leftist group took out a large section of Berlin's power grid for like 4 days in the dead of winter, and at least one person died. And the response of the government is, oh, well, I guess that's just part and parcel of doing business in a big city. They know instinctively that they cannot attack the radical side of their own coalition. Once the system becomes ungovernable, once it becomes radicalized, for the first time in a very long time, the cracks in the Democratic coalition will actually be genuine political fissures. And the different parts of the progressive hydra will start attacking each other. And this will start, I predict, when the power starts being transferred from the hands of old white women to young non-white men. At that point, the nature of progressivism will change from a kind of touchy-feely white universalism that was the hallmark of progressivism in the late 20th century to a much more vindictive and much more revolutionary third worldism. And at that point, the cohesion that's shared throughout what we call the cathedral will start to completely break down. I think this question will start to become answered in 2026. It's weird though. It's weird though, because it is possible that the left could get into power again after Trump as the left. Still, like white progressives could see power again in 2028. But how many more elections do they have to go? Especially if the predictions of Curtis Yarvin are true. For instance, one thing that the Democrats will be tempted to do if they get back into power in 2028 is just to open the floodgates to all immigration for 4 years. In which case, the demographics of the United States will be completely swamped, and the Republican Party will cease to be viable electorally for the foreseeable future, for forever, perhaps. Or really any kind of conservative Western force will be swamped under just the third world mass of people that will come with a completely open immigration policy, as people like Curtis Yarvin have predicted might be one of the possible choices the Democrats choose to pursue, one of the possible policies the Democrats might choose to pursue in 2028 as an element of vengeance against the American middle class. The problem is that will also be the last in ending white conservatism. The Democrats will also end white progressivism. From that point forward, American politics will be strictly reduced to tribalism between various different immigrant groups, seeing how much wealth they can grab from the carcass that was America and hold away from the mass of other people. That will be the new American politics going forward. It will completely destroy progressivism as we know it. So, the question really is how many more, and like inside that little war of ethnic nepotism that would occur after the demographic destruction of America, there will still be right-wing forces. As a matter of fact, pretty much all people of a heritage ethnicity will probably be in a giant right-wing coalition together. So the right wing will persist, the Republican Party will be dead, and white progressivism, as we've known it in the 20th century, will also be permanently dead. The question is, can white progressivism actually pull off that final move, that final kind of act of homicide, suicide? Can it kind of pull off the destruction of the United States in its last act of self-immolation? I don't know. It's kind of a race against time, isn't it? It's kind of a race against time. And in the meantime, the question is, can the corruption be contained? This is one thing. I don't think people realize just how psychologically damaging the Somali daycare scandals were for white America in particular. It made everybody feel like absolute and complete fools for going to work, for trying to pay off loans, when people were just taking out millions of dollars, for non-existent students, and would amount to thousands of dollars of money just because they had kids. I mean, the government doesn't pay me $2,000 a month because I have a kid. Does America actually reward honesty? That's a question that will be answered. And the answer is either, I don't know. I mean, this is sort of similar to the question that the Democrats have. The Democrats essentially want to legalize corruption for their client groups. Is that going to be the permanent state of affairs? If the American political dynamic is Republicans tamp down on corruption a little bit during Republican administrations, and then when Democrats get into power, the doors are open and the money just flies right out the front door to all their client groups. If this question is no, America is in a permanent state of Gib corruption, The people who are rich in America are the people who are able to attach themselves to the taxpayer tit and drain the system. If that's the answer, America as we know it has died. And I mean, 2026 has to answer this question. The first question, are the Democrats going to come back? If the Democrats get back into power in 2028, then obviously corruption is unstoppable in America. But the question that 2026 has to answer is, if the Republicans stay in power, can they stop this corruption? Because if the answer is no, then even if the Democrats don't get back into power in 2028, America is still on the road to essentially destroying itself, albeit in a slower, more incremental way. And this brings me to the next question. This is not just for America, this is for Europe too, although I imagine that the corruption problem in Europe is a little bit less than it is in the United States, or at least in some areas of the United States. But this is an extensive question for everybody. Can the West's demographics be stabilized? Carl Benjamin, Sargon, had a great term for this, and I want to steal it. But I'm going to start using this here. And I think everyone should use this term going forward. We can talk about remigration, which I'm glad people mainstream that, because I think we need to have it on the table. And that's all well and good. We can talk about like heritage Americans, and I'll get into that on the next slide. We can talk about heritage Americans. That it opens up a can of worms philosophically, but we'll table that. It's a good term to have in your back pocket. And always the question should be on what our identity is, not on who other people's identity is. But the question Sargon raised up, the word he used to describe this question is, can we achieve, and I love this term, demographic security? Demographic security. I just want you to burn that word into your heads. Every Republican should be talking about demographic security. I'm not talking about, making America a white country, or whether it should be a white country, or who's a heritage American and who's not. Whatever. We can have the Steve Loss conversation later. But everybody, no matter what race they are, whether they're Chinese or white or African American, you can understand that if the demographics of Western countries are not stabilized, if the future of this country is not comprised of your children, but rather of people that are going to be imminently imported from the outside world, you are not safe. Your politicians aren't loyal. They're not incentivized to stop corruption. You have no control over your politicians, because your politicians' careers are not based on the people who are voting for them now. They're based on the people who they're going to bring in the next fiscal year. Demographic security, demographic security. People have a right to demographic security. They have a right to know that the country's composition cannot radically be altered to disadvantage the people who live here. There has to be a core thing that citizens ask of their country. Otherwise, you don't have a country. I will say one more thing here. And Black Horse, my friend Black Horse did ask me to address this question. The call for demographic stability and the reemergence of a right wing does in part also hinge on the idea of a new international order. This is something that I think Americans in particular, although I see Europeans do this a lot, they miss this piece of the puzzle. The left was strong because it had an international vision of how the future should be, how the governments of all countries should act in relationship to each other. Without that, you have this crazy making factory that is the Trump administration. And this is a big failure of the Trump administration. Trump's job is not to annex Canada. My wife hates it when I say this. My in-laws hate this when I say this. But the reason why it's not Trump's job to annex Canada is because America already annexed Canada. They annexed Canada after the British Empire broke up. And I think it was the first Trudeau administration built stronger relationships with the State Department than they did with the British Commonwealth, thus making Canada an American client state. Trump's role is not to humiliate the Canadian government. Trump's role is to abolish the Canadian government and to insert a new Canadian government that is ideologically aligned with Trump-style nationalism, which, if he's doing it right, should hold demographic security as one of its top priorities for securing international peace. And this should be the message of the international right wing. There can be no global security without demographic security. There can be no global security without demographic security. There can be no global security without demographic security. Demographic change is a security risk for Western countries. It creates instability. It creates vectors of disloyalty. It is literally in the middle of creating a pseudo-civil war in Minneapolis right now. This cannot persist. A right wing that replaces progressivism as the new reigning order of the West has to have an international vision that is built along something of these common, broad visions of how humanity should live internationally, because it's international order. The modern elite in Europe and in America are unified ideologically. That's what makes them so powerful. That's why they don't attack each other. That's why they mutually understand that all left-wingers are on the same side, even if their tactics aren't on the same side. If you want to replace this, you have to have something similar. And the vision isn't there yet. And every time I see Americans and Europeans do these little one-upmanship games, I kind of cringe. It's a dimension of this problem that needs to be solved. The way to destroy I'll put it this way. If you are an American nationalist, I do not think you can replace the deep state without replacing the governments of Europe with something that is sympathetic to you and which you see yourself in. Let's say that you're in charge of a new nationalist America. You need to be able to look over the pond to your cousins in England and say, those are our international allies in the great mission to rule the human race in the name of these, this right-wing vision. We wouldn't call it right-wing, but this new human-centered vision for the future. You have to look across the border to Ottawa and say, those are our friendly neighbors to the north, which, although they have these silly ideas about, I don't know, these silly ideas about poutine or hockey, nevertheless are in a common mission with us to rule the North American continent in the name of these values. If you can't do that, you are a strictly weaker force than the current cathedral that rules the Western world. And that's unsustainable, especially since half the security threats to the Western world are in Europe right now. Or, I don't know, half. How am I even measuring that? There is a major security threat against the West in Europe right now. If you're not solving that problem, you're not acting like an alternative government in waiting. But this, I guess, gets on to sort of the challenge for the right wing. And this is the ultimate question that we are going to have to come to terms with across the next year. I'm coming up on 2 hours here, so I should kind of wrap things up. I'm certainly getting tired. There was an interesting interview between Andrew Gold and Steve Laws. I never heard of Steve Laws before, but he apparently is this British nationalist, and Andrew Gold is some kind of, I don't know. He's a Jewish conservative of some moderate variety. And again, it was kind of like the Piers Morgan versus Nick Fuentes debate, where I think like a lot of boomers probably thought Andrew Gold got the best of it. But if you watched it with any kind of critical eye, you could immediately see that this was essentially Steve Laws, the show. I don't agree. Again, I see the vision of the West as much more international. But Steve Laws won because he came into the interview with one single proposition. That proposition was, I am an Englishman, and my people are the English people. And we have a right not to be made extinct. And he just repeated that again and again and again. And you could tell, what was Andrew Gold? Is that his name? I think it's Andrew Gold. Andrew Gold had set up all of these like gotchas around the Holocaust, around conspiracy theories, around all of these. He had a moderate position that was, he was holding out as an olive branch. And the thing is that it didn't work. There was a few moments where Steve Laws got sidetracked. Again, I don't know anything about this guy other than this debate. There's a few moments when Steve Laws got sidetracked, but he just kept on returning back to the imperative. And the imperative was, this is who I am, these are my people, and this is my desire to survive. And at some point, Andrew Gold has said, oh, well, the English, they're going to go extinct. You should just make your peace with that. To which Steve Laws could have replied, although he didn't. He could have replied, well, would you be at peace with the Jewish people going extinct? I don't think Andrew Gold would have been. I really do hope that was his name. I didn't write it down in the show notes, but that was the subtext. That was the critical moment. Why should somebody who's not you, who does not care about the future of your posterity because they're perfectly willing to let them go extinct, at what point can they just come up and say, well, you should be resigned to your own destruction? Just make peace with that. If you accept that, then you've accepted your own extinction. Why even play politics after that? Why even participate in any of that after admitting to that? And this is the thing. This is the critical thing. This is the critical place we've all gotten to. Unless you can say, this is who I am, this is who we are, there's really no point in taking another step. You notice this with people like Andrew Gold. I had a debate, what was it, like 2 years ago, with this liberal King Crocoduck, who's also a huge Zionist. This guy is the biggest Zionist. All he does every day on Twitter is talk about Zionism and Israel and all this stuff. Okay. But what's my version of Zionism? Who are my people? And look, I'm not going to say that he was against the idea of any collectivism for Gentiles whatsoever, but you could always see this. And I think King Crocoduck is an otherwise reasonable guy. But you can see this. He's really, really dedicated to Zionism. But every time you move towards a specific nationalism for your own people, unless it exists in the most vague way possible, like I'm a Christian, therefore my nationalism is the nationalism of all Christian people everywhere, regardless of denomination, regardless of peoplehood, regardless of history. That's not a meaningful political organization, because most of those people in that group do not see themselves as one people. Every time in that conversation with King Crocoduck, I am moved towards a collective label that would describe a real political group for which we could say, these are our people, or this is my people, the way that Steve Laws did with the English, there was this immediate resistance on the part of King Crocoduck. Like, he knew that he had to admit that such a thing was possible, but every time you propose something that felt politically viable, it was like, oh no, that's white nationalism. Oh no, that's ethno-nationalism. Oh no, that is fascist. That's that yucky thing that we're trying to get away from. But I mean, you're trying to get away from it because you do not want to have the conversation that comes after it. And the conversation that comes after it is, what does our politics need to be to preserve the existence of our collective into the future? That's the conversation that Zionists engage in. That's not a conversation that Zionists engage in. That is the conversation that Zionism itself tries to address for the Jewish people. So what's the equivalent of that for the English, for the Irish, for the white Americans, for the white Southern Americans, for the Germans? I come from an ethnic group that no longer really exists, although that coalition broadly under the title of German in the old world, at least during the 20th century. I have no understanding of who my people are. I'm American, but so is Ilhan Omar. I'm not a heritage American. My family hasn't been here long enough. I don't think there's really an answer for who we are. If you are part of an ethnic group that is cohesive and large and has a sense of itself, maybe like the English do, maybe like the French still do, maybe, although I think it's an outside possibility, like the Germans do, then I think that's a place to start. I don't think that any people can find proper will to live or proper cohesiveness, proper asabaya, although I'm butchering the Arabic. I don't think any people can find any of those things without a deep connection to God and spiritual truth. But if you have an identity for yourself, you have a place to start looking. You have a banner to start organizing. And if you are, like most of us, in kind of a limbo state, now is the time to start building. Oh, you knew this pitch was coming. But I'm just, throughout my blog and throughout my videos, I always read the comments. And people sometimes leave very aggressive comments on my videos. They like, especially on YouTube, people don't do that on Substack. On Substack, when I write an essay, you usually only get comments that are very positive. But on YouTube, you always get these trolls. On Twitter, you always get trolls or whatever. And whenever you do a video or something that goes viral, eventually you'll have someone from the old time going, I used to watch these YouTube videos, but now I'm just focused on building my own life and my own community and my own faith in real life. And I go, bumping my microphone, I go, that is perfect. That is exactly what I want you to do. If the only thing you get from watching this channel is the impetus to build your own community and to discover your own collectivity and to rediscover your own connection to divine spirituality, then this YouTube channel has been a success, because that is the only way out of this for any of us. We need political organizations. We need fraternal societies. And again, look, let's say you do have a cohesive identity as a Southerner, as an Englishman, as a New Englander, as a Frenchman whose line can be traced all the way back to Charlemagne of France. Congratulations. That is worth nothing if you're not putting it into action with actual organization, with actual community building, with the actual pursuit of faith and family. That is where identity actually obtains its meaning, in action. And that's the challenge of 2026. This is, I wrote out the questions. I didn't write this one in. We have questions about who's going to win. Will the American empire stabilize itself financially and geopolitically? You know, that's looking a little bit questionable right now. Will boomers hang on to power for another year? Will the left return to power one last time to demographically destroy what remains of the old Western world? Or have we finally passed the hurdle of white progressivism and now we're in a new situation where we're directly contending with third world political organizations in the West and competing in a more direct realpolitik way? What is our new identity going to be? And that's not a singular question. People will come up with different answers for that question in different places. Pursuant to that, what is the broader ideology? What are the broader principles that takes the variety of different right-wing identities in each individual nation and in each individual people and unifies them under a common banner that can present a better vision for humanity? That's another question. Can we develop something that looks like that in 2026? All of these are open questions. Another real open question for everyone here who's listening: how well can we organize in modernity? How well can we organize in the post social media age? How much can we organize in the post diversity age, in the post mass migration age? This is an open question. Curtis Yarvin wrote an article. I can't remember what it was called. It was this big manifesto about the problems with the Trump regime and what was actually needed and how you could organize people. And he has this formula like political energy is equal to E is equal to MC squared, right? And M, I believe, is like mass of people or something like that, or mobilization of people. C is cohesion, and the other C is commitment, hence the squared, right? So it's the mobilization of the people times how cohesive they are times how committed they are. And Curtis Yarvin says right off the bat, and this is his big mistake, it's been my number one mistake with him since the beginning. He says modern people cannot be properly religiously convicted in anything. They are incapable of belief and conviction. So we have to focus on cohesion. And thank God we have the internet, which generates cohesion without commitment. That is where he goes wrong everywhere. Commitment and cohesion are not independent variables. They are dependent variables. The cohesion you get online is completely illusionary. What matters is the commitment in people's hearts to make sacrifices for a cause. So without commitment, you can have no meaningful cohesion. Because any cohesion that you get from a purely internet-based source will be destroyable by the deep state with the slightest perturbation on the algorithm. We saw this in 2019. The cathedral was able to completely destroy the right wing just with a change of the algorithm, and nothing remotely similar has been able to grow up in the ashes of that movement to destroy what was the old right wing before COVID. Without commitment, your cohesion will not last against any contact with an enemy force. And while the American empire is wounded, while the ideology of progressivism is indeed dying, it still has the wherewithal to change an algorithm. You will not have cohesion without commitment, which is why the question of 2026 is what commitment can be created using the tools of online and off. We have lots of disadvantages. Again, it's the post-social media age. It is the post-COVID world. It is the post-liberal order. It is the post-mass migration West. People have never been more atomized than they are right now. But the challenges have never been more direct. And without cohesion and without commitment, no amount of mobilization is going to matter because all of the populist energy is going to fade away as quickly as did the kind of Rubicon energy of the Trump administration faded away in the first 100 days. We have to find ways to come together and to find commitments. Ideally, in an intergenerational sense, the commitments have to be religious in nature. But I think, and again, this is the challenge for everyone here, the commitments have to start with personality, with meeting other people, with forming personal commitments to each other. Do you have a coterie of people who live near you who share these ideas or some rough approximation of them? Maybe if you live in a highly conservative area, but for the most people, that's a struggle. These ideas have to start becoming real. I mean, I don't know. Again, if all this YouTube channel does is convince you to go out and start building, I've done my job. But I'm telling you, the challenges that we see, the challenges of that Somali corruption, or the people who are just staring you right in the eye and saying that they want your people to go extinct because your culture and race are shit, that's not a dialectic conversation. That's not discourse. That's not something you can settle in a Jubilee debate, even though those people might appear on Jubilee debates. It is simply a contest of wills, and a contest of wills in politics is garnered through commitment, collectively. It's gained through asabiya. It's gained through faith. In 2026, the question is to what extent we can attain that commitment to each other and to a higher power. Well, with that, that is the end of the lecture portion of this stream. The entropy chat is in the description. Thank you very much. Okay, do I have some tea? Man, it's impossible not to cough. I've had this flu. The flu's been gone for a week, but you still have this cough. It just will not go away. And the energy just does not return the way it should have. But let's get the entropy chats going on here. Okay, thank God it's working. Okay, perfect here. Aspiring misanthrope for $3 USA. Maduro and Venezuela. Massive risk on Trump's part, but the payoff is so big it's hidden in the clouds. Euros, Russia, China, and all the stinking Latin American commies pissing their pants. America. Yeah, so look, I'll give you my take on the Maduro thing. I am a big non-interventionalist as a rule, but I'm also a realist. In my nightmare, my absolute positive nightmare is for some foreign power, either Russia or China, and probably it's most likely China, to take over some country in the New World, like Canada, or like one of these oil-producing Latin American countries, or Cuba, and start loading up that country with hypersonic missiles and drones, and triggering all sorts of proxy wars across the continent that will be bloodbaths like Ukraine. I don't want a Ukrainian-style bloodbath in my backyard, especially if it's between Canada and the United States, but I digress. This is my absolute nightmare. And the idea that Venezuela might become a Chinese client, look, I wish we could have solved this problem through non-intervention. But if this held off a Cold War in the Americas, that's a tough call. And if Trump can pull off a regime change that prevents that, I think it might be, the best of a variety of very bad options. Shadow ban for $5 USA. About 6% of cocaine and almost no fentanyl come through Venezuela. I am sure the administration knows that, so drugs are just a pretense. Yeah, I mean, I don't, I think drugs, I agree. Drugs are a pretense. The big risk of Venezuela is not drugs. The big risk of Venezuela is that it becomes a client state to one of America's enemies, supplying those enemies with energy, and also allowing them to use their land as a base of operation for future deployments, which would be a disaster. Tiberius R for $3 USA. I want to ask, how do you think we should try to recreate a deep culture for America as a people in the 21st century when tech merchants turn everything into consumer slop? Also, Happy New Year. Well, I mean, look, slop is what you make it. There are things that are not slop in this world. For instance, right? I mean, the Studio Ghibli. Remember last year? It was like a year ago, wasn't it? When OpenAI came out with the Studio Ghibli filter, and they're like, we can turn anything into Studio Ghibli, and people turned. They did a bunch of things, like they turned like Alayla's birthday gangbang into a Studio Ghibli comic book, and like just absolutely disgusting stuff. Uh, Great. So I'm sure if you stare at that AI slop for long enough, it will begin to desecrate Studio Ghibli. But it didn't for me because I just kept on watching the original things and ignored the slop, and the original Studio Ghibli things didn't lose any of their power, emotional power. It was fine. Anyway, that's yeah, I think this AI slop stuff, I really think this is just accelerating a trend that social media created. I mean, I am not saying there's a lot of dangers to AI. There's a lot of dangers to this technology. I don't think we've even begun to scratch the surface of these dangers. But if we're just talking about culture and slop, these things are just tools. If you abuse these tools, they will destroy culture by slopifying it. And I think it's very, very hard to use them in a way that does not lead to crap, because part of the utility of art is that the artist's will is moving through the thing. The difference between putting a CD in a CD player and hitting play and literally picking up a violin and playing it. If you can understand the magic of live instrument performance over recorded music, then you will understand the nature of non slopified art in an age of AI. It is in part, the artist moving through his instrument. But thank you. I hope I answered that question sufficiently. I think I gave it a good go. Estavo Lopez for $10 USA. Hi, Dave. Best regards. I think I heard you say in the podcast with PF Young that you're not a nationalist. Would you care to elaborate why? Yeah, okay. So I think I kind of hinted at it. Okay, so there's a few things here. I don't know what direction you want to take it in. Nationalism as an ideology is an artifact of the 19th century. It is a form of modernity. And the idea of nationalism is that a people, a cohesive people, have the right to wield supreme sovereignty in the form of nations. In a sense, I am a nationalist in that I think that peoples should have self determination and the ability to forge a future for themselves. I think that that it is good to let them do that, or alternatively, you could say it is a right in the eyes of a Christian God for them to be able to do that. I don't like talking about rights as if they exist independently from some larger moral premise. So, I'm saying it in a weird way. I think they have a right to do that. But the problem with nationalism is that it creates this idea that political power should be wielded through these groups that are looking to secure power for themselves for the future. and that their future is dependent on the amount of power, political power, that they've accumulated in their national project. This has some very, very problematic things because when it comes to a country like America, when it comes to a country like the country my grandmother was born in, although in the last year of its existence, the Austro-Hungarian Empire or the Habsburg empires, these countries contain multiple nations of people within their borders. And the last thing you want these nations to do is to go to war against each other, which is what nationalism encourages. Ideally, I'd like a lot of states that fight for the good of their peoples, but they'll have to fight for the good of multiple peoples at once. And furthermore, on a global level, there needs to be a global vision for what the future of humanity needs to be. The technology is too dangerous at this time. If we have a race to the bottom with manufacturing virulent diseases or weapons of mass destruction or out of control artificial intelligence, you can imagine all sorts of doomsday scenarios coming from that. And that's exactly what will happen when these little nations compete with each other with no larger international order to hold them in line. So both on the microcosmic scale, nationalism, the nationalistic urge needs to be held in line to some greater political good that rules over them, like the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And then the international scale, there needs to be some kind of order that ensures that the good of humanity wins out over nations' individual desire to compete with each other. That's why I am not a nationalist in the classic sense or in any meaningful sense of the word, in my opinion. Generico for $20 USA. Hi, Dave. Are you open to doing another New Year's stream with Sargon? Oh, that's a great idea. Oh, yeah. Why don't I do that? I should have done that. I should have done that with him. I mean, okay, I'll tell you why I didn't reach out and do it with him. It's because I don't have the vacation time. I spent all of my vacation this time flat on my ass with the flu or taking care of my kid and wife who got the flu this year. That's where my vacation time went. And usually to set up a stream with Sargon, I had to take like 3 hours out of my day to actually do the thing because the time zones are so different between the UK and America. So that's why I didn't do it. Anyway, thanks, Generico. Tibarius R for $3 USA. 2 questions. Has your criticism of the alt-right the same as it was in 2017 video series on your channel? I think I lifted my previous 2 comments on nationalism straight from that video. Those were 2 of them right there. So those haven't changed. 2, how do we prepare for post-Trump old who do think, how do we prepare for post-Trump old? Who do you think will succeed him? Who should? Well, it's not my call. The front runner is JD Vance. I don't know who should. I have a lot of reservations about JD Vance, specifically his connection to the PayPal mafia. I consider Silicon Valley to be kind of a frenemy, and I do not want them at the head of a new American order. I am not convinced that JD Vance is a strong enough person to really make the changes that I'm talking about that we all know are necessary. And I don't know. He's a very strange individual. I feel, he's much more of he's not really a Caesar. He's much more like a Marius or some other a pre-Caesarian figure. So I honestly don't know. No one on the scene has stuck their head above the parapet and really shown the kind of leadership you would need to make these radical changes. So there's that. Anyway, that's let's for my criticism of the alt-right. I am pretty sure that all of my individual criticisms of the alt-right from that video series in 2017 hold up. The one thing that I would say is I think that white identity politics in America are just inevitable at this point. We've crossed the Rubicon at this point. There is going to be there might not, the only difference is there might not be one white identity, there might be multiple white ethnic groups. Without an ability to stand up and say, my people, we're never going to be able to fight back against the discrimination that you saw highlighted in that Jacob Savage piece. We're never going to be able to fight back against the people who just start bragging and gloating about how they want to see us go extinct. We're never going to fight back against any of this stuff unless we can stand up and say, our people. And I don't know what that's going to mean individually. I think it's going to be regional, but I think that individual ethnic identities are going to play a very, very large role and potentially a positive role in the future of the right wing going forward. I don't see how they can't. And in 2017, I was very skeptical of that proposition. But in 2025, I am much warmer to that proposition as part of the total solution. All of my other criticisms about the alt-right, about the irreligiosity, about the lack of an international vision, about the inherent problems of nationalism to lead to petty contests and petty wars that destroy the future prospects of humanity, the fact that we need a vision for multicultural spaces in a globalist age and multiracial people in a globalist age, all of those critiques are 100% in effect. But I think that those observations need to be brought in line with just the reality that if these indigenous ethnic groups cannot come up with a conceptualization of their own political interests, they're just doomed, and they're doomed in a way that will lead to a lot of bad outcomes from humanity. They will, with them will burn a lot of the civilizational utility that has been learned over the last 500 years, and that is essential for creating a more healthy international order for the human species. The destruction of the European peoples would be a disaster for the human race generally. And I think you should be able to appreciate that regardless of what race you are, because it's just an obvious manifest truth. Is obvious and manifest the same thing? I think like obvious is that it's easy to see, and manifest is that it has been made apparent. It has been brought into existence. It is in front of your eyes. I think they're subtly different, but I digress. Aspiring misanthrope for $3. The Minneapolis ICE shooting victim will be given another gold coffin, another victim for the cause. The mob is already gathering. One problem, we already have keyed up right-wing Zoomers who don't care. Right-wing Zoomers need to join a collective organization that embodies their interests, or they will be destroyed. Do I have to explain that to them? They've seen everything that I've seen, and it certainly left an impression on me. Do they think they're just going to like hunker down as individualistic nihilists and ride this out? Or alternatively, as religious monks, they're just going to be individually pious? I don't think that's the future. Look, Minneapolis does not involve the right wing. I should have said this. Minneapolis is a test for the Trump administration. Minneapolis is not a test of the broader right wing. It is not. Anyway, thank you very much, aspiring misanthrope. Let's keep on going. Stradal assassin for $5 USA. Hypothetical, there is a race of people who left Earth 50,000 years ago to the planet Pluto. Well, Pluto's not a planet. They're tall, golden-skinned with the average IQ of 120. They have returned. Would it be wise to trust them? How wary should we be of them? No, it is not wise to trust them. It is not wise to trust any alien entity until you understand their values and see a demonstration of it. And even then, it's good to keep them at arm's length. Just think of like the Sentinelese or the Sentinel Island people. If we made contact with them, the diseases that we have in our body would destroy them inadvertently. When settlers came to America, there were some ethnic cleansings to be sure, but most of the destruction visited on the Native American population in North America was entirely incidental. It was a cause of essentially like habitat destruction. These tribes relied on animals that they needed to hunt, and that was destroyed, cultural destruction, the introduction of drugs like alcohol and opium, the introduction of diseases like smallpox. All of these things devastated these Native American communities inadvertently. And so if you were to meet these aliens, you should be incredibly skeptical and incredibly guarded. If they have good intentions, they will understand that skepticism and keep their distance. I feel like this is the Avatar question, right? These sort of super strong, super intelligent blue aliens with USB ports built into their skulls. Uh, I don't know. But just like study history, I think the answer is obvious. Like the idea that highly advanced aliens would be benign is such a boomer truth regime thing. It's such like an artifact of Star Trek and some Twilight Zone episodes. Although I think the Twilight Zone had a number of episodes where the opposite was true. But you know, it's such an artifact of the boomer truth regime. Seneca for $3 says, "Hey, I finally caught one of these live." Yes, well, welcome, Seneca. Thank you for the super chat. You have me while my voice still holds out. Asteroidal Assassin for $3. What will feminists do when more and more men are just happy not being married or even getting sex? Feminists don't rely on male sexual attention. They rely on society's attention generally. So men would have to stop getting angry at feminists, and they just have to completely ignore. Men would have to do something very difficult. They would have to only pay attention to women who were essentially their wives or who were married to them or who were their mothers or mothers' friends. And that would mean that they would have to basically ignore all sexually available young women, except as it pertained to getting those young women husbands. Because the feminist thrives on attention that's paid to her, whether it's positive or negative. Any attention is good attention for women generally, and they will try to obtain that by any means necessary. That's why the only way out of gender slop is to stop participating in gender slop. You have to walk away from the men versus women discourse and just focus on getting power and resources for men. That's the only solution. Rattling Saber for $15 USA. Howdy, Dave. I'm coming from a red state, and it's incredible to see media made by blue staters. It's very apparent lately that the people who make movies, etc., have almost nothing in common to my own cohort. Any thoughts? In addition, do you have any tips for essay writing? Thanks. I love your content. I had a white paper that got destroyed when my Discord server went down about how to write essays. I wish I could resurrect that. Maybe I could summarize some points here. I guess like I don't know. I don't know if the division is red state versus blue state. For instance, I like I said at the outset, I am watching David Lynch's Twin Peaks, and boy, I really feel like Twin Peaks. I think that it is highly discernible to a red state audience. I think that a red state audience could watch Twin Peaks and appreciate its values or what it describes. Obviously, it's kind of a horror movie, so it describes immoral behavior because everyone's murdering each other and doing drugs, but it's not, it exists in the cultural landscape of red America, and it is a product of David Lynch, who lived in Hollywood, in blue America, you know? That's that, right? I mean, these artifacts, the reason why suddenly in the last 10 years, Hollywood has been making crap is because they fired. I mean, let's stop mincing words. They stopped trying to find talent and they started just going for diversity and ideology. I think that the secret story inside Jacob Savage's Lost Generation article is the story of how Hollywood sucks because they're promoting. What does Isaac Simpson say? It feels like every Hollywood movie is is written these days by some Asian woman midwit. Like it's like everything, everywhere, all at once. It's like this ultimate midwit movie written by. I don't even know if it's written by an Asian woman. I just assume. It feel like there's no point. There's no emotional edge. It feels like a pastiche of all these different things. The spiritual energy is all off. It's technically very well done, but at the same time, you're kind of left thinking, okay, so what's the point of all this? This is kind of stupid. Oh, and writing advice. Look, writing good essays is all about kind of being honest with yourself. And first of all, it's about organizing your thoughts. That's what they try to teach you in college with the 5-paragraph essay. But what the 5-paragraph essay leaves out is it's too stilted. It's just like how to write an essay that's very easy to grade. Real essays in the real world start with a hook or an introduction of a question or a topic or a controversy. Then they roll up a bunch of things that you're thinking about and are questioning. And then they circle around. Most good essays have kind of a circular format where they return to the original question or controversy with some thesis that ties all the observations together. And it's that circular form that creates the really good essay, right? The circular form, like, hook, ruminations, thesis, conclusion. And everyone says when you're learning how to do a tennis stroke, that as you get better doing the tennis stroke, it becomes more circular. And the same thing is true for good essay writing. Although I can't give you everything in one super chat. Whimsical Raccoon for $5 says, "Hey Dave, love your channel. I want to ask you, as a highly educated man, should young white guys go to college anymore? Soon done with my JUCO junior college 2 years, but I'm a humanities guy. I don't have STEM in me, and economic outcomes look bad. Advice." Look, college degrees are still useful. If you can get them without getting in debt, do it. I think that I can't look into the future and predict what is going to be good and what is not. But if you have a junior college degree, at least, it seems like it makes sense to finish it, but try to finish it without getting into debt. Because that degree, it will help you a little bit, but it won't help you a lot. And while you're finishing it in college, look for jobs. After you get done with your college degree and you're in humanities, make sure that you have a portfolio of work that you can show somebody who might want to try to hire you in a professional capacity. Make sure that if you're a writer, you're submitting articles and you're getting them published. Make sure that if you're doing fine arts, that you're essentially submitting them to other people to have them used and present them as work that you've done. Do not make the result of your stint in college be a list of grades. Those grades are meaningless. Now, I can't in good conscience tell you not to get a degree because 90% of employers at this point still, at least on paper, say they prefer a degree. Now, they prefer a degree from a non-white man, and so your race and sex are probably really going to disadvantage you more than the degree will advantage you. But you're not going to stop being a white man by not getting a degree. So before you go to college, come up with a plan for an industry that you want to enter. And then while you're getting your degree, pretend like you were working in that industry and make a portfolio of work that pertains directly to what that industry produces. And that's your best shot at an opening job. And try to build relationships. Try to build relationships with people who are working in the industry that you want to target. That should put you head and shoulders above the people who are scamming that degree. And there will be a lot of people who are scamming that degree. The Shadow Band for $15 says, "By the way, Happy New Year's. Thank you very much." Spartan G62 says, "Very black pilling seeing our side get on board with another neocon project in Venezuela." Look, Spartan, I agree. This was 100% a neocon project. It is also a very tough call when China is also creating an imperialist project in our backyard. And I don't know. I can't, in good conscience, condemn the administration for undertaking this regime change, considering the security risks at play. But I say that with full knowledge that some serious pieces of shit are making boatloads of money off this operation. And of course, a lot of our enemies are advancing their interests at the same time. I just think that, I'm trying to see both sides of it. There are a lot of advantages for us. So, look, it's a double edged sword, and I understand your concerns. Cool Guy for $5 says there are no radical or insane leftists. These leftists are just the spoiled priests and bureaucrats produced by America for America. Well, I don't know about that. There are certainly a lot of insane people that call themselves leftists. You could say that their being spoiled made them insane, but they are, by any ordinary metric of insanity, absolutely insane. I mean, look at this woman who got herself shot by ICE just a few hours ago. I mean, I'm sure in some objective sense, she was a very nice woman, but she was acting like a crazy person. I don't know what to call this behavior, if not insanity. They're ideologically possessed and they're doing things that are destroying their lives and the lives of their children for nothing. For what? So you can have a big showdown with armed apparatus of the federal government? Are you crazy? Like, what are you thinking? I would say the same thing to a right winger. What are you thinking? You're going to march up to the army and like brandish your gun at them, and then you get shot. That's insane behavior. It is insane behavior. And you've accomplished nothing for your cause. Once fanaticism takes actions like that, I have no problem calling it insane. Bright Dawn for $5 USA. I call this Diocletian's Law. A political party's success is determined by its emotional impact, not practical. Diocletian's price controls were an economic disaster, but a political necessity, hence why price controls exist to this day. Yeah, I mean, you have to consider all of Diocletian's policies to be kind of a failed attempt to prop up a fundamentally insolvent system, notwithstanding his attempt to suppress Christianity. The future was Christianity at that stage. The change had already been made, and his attempt to suppress Christianity, like his attempt to suppress prices, was ultimately futile. I guess I don't see the point in. I mean, I guess I do a little bit, and in some ways, isn't the Venezuela operation an attempt to prop up a fundamentally unstable American empire, perhaps futilely? Yes, and I get the sense. I understand you don't want to plunge your society into chaos, especially when you have children. So I guess I should sympathize with Diocletian. But I mean, looking back, it just looks like the guy killed a bunch of people for no reason whatsoever, so that he could stop a change that was necessarily going to come regardless. Bright Dawn again for $5. Dostoevsky talked about great conquerors like Genghis Khan had a noble goal deep down to unite humanity, a common desire. John Lennon's Imagine plays to the same desire. That's why people keep believing in it, and politicians that push it do well. Look, I mean, every reigning ideology has to be an ideology for the entire world. Now, does that mean that you can have no loyalty to your individual people? Absolutely not. But especially in this age, you need to have a vision for the future of humanity as a whole to rule the world. And that's what we're talking about here. Who's going to rule the world? Blank for $5 says, I proposed to my girlfriend 3 years ago in November on the Heritage American question. I hope that, I mean, did she say yes? I hope so. On the Heritage American question, it's pretty clear who is the club pre-Civil War whites and all is pretty clear who is in the club, pre-Civil War whites and all blacks. Those are two different nations, but obviously these are the two founding stocks. I mean, like I said before, There's lots of different groups. There are the WASP or OG whites, and those are both of southern and northern extractions who are different tribes. And then the Black American tribe, who's a different tribe from those two tribes. Then you have the Ellis Islanders and the post Ellis Islanders before the mass immigration waves. And all of those groups have intermarried with each other. So, yeah, you're talking about a variety of different uh, peoples. There are very few white people in this country right now that are 100% pre-Civil War white. It is a very small fraction of the population. I mean, especially if you count fractional admixture. I mean, no, there were no mating barriers between various different types of Northern European whites. So very few people have pure undiluted strain from like the Mayflower or something. Great. I mean, like, so you define the word heritage, but you still haven't defined what the meaningful people are of North America and how they can organize themselves politically, which is the real question when we ask, what is a heritage American? Blank again for $5 says, I think an international right may be impossible. Well, we're using that word euphemistically, right? I mean, international right implies international enforcement system or universal morality. Now, I believe that there's a universal morality created by God, but that's why I never say right without referencing the fact that this is really a religious proposition. The international left spread because it was an American empire's interest for it to spread. A strong, demographically secure Europe is probably against the Americans' interests. Wouldn't that obviously create a rival? I mean, yes, it would, but you're going to have those countries destabilize unless they are demographically secure. So it is in America's interest. I mean, look, blank. According to the current rulers of the American empire, the only future is for them to totally liquidate the populations of all their client states and replace them with the third world. That is what the rulers of the American empire, the Trump administration notwithstanding, possibly, but that is what all of the deep state people believe at this point. They're either that or they're technology millenarians. They're death cultists. So, great. They think it's in the interest of the empire to destroy you. I don't know what to say to that other than to come up with a plan to resist it, because I am not going to assent to my own extinction individually or collectively. That is insane. Thomas Sodor for $5 USA. A lot of people on Xitter are saying that the shooting could bring the next summer of Floyd. But Floyd people chimp out differently than Renee Good people. Plus, it's hard to riot in Minnesota winter. How do you think this affects the power grab? Yeah, I think that this is a very ill-conceived riot. The timing is wrong. The cause is wrong. The left doesn't seem particularly united, and the casus belli, the reason for going to war, it's not clear. It's not clean. They're basically trying to turn, as opposed to having a second George Floyd, they have a second Kyle Rittenhouse. and what made George Floyd effective was that a certain portion of Republicans essentially agreed that it was a bad kill, even though it probably wasn't. In hindsight of the coroner's report, excuse me. So I think that the left is walking into a giant disaster at this stage. I think they've got another thing coming if they keep pursuing this. So it's I don't know. I do not think this is going to work out for them in the way they think. I think that they will riot even though it is winter, but the riots will not last for long because even though their leaders are telling them, you have reason to riot, you have reason to riot, the wind chill coming off the river is going to tell them, no way, go home. And eventually people are going to lose energy very, very quickly. Taiwi Priar Tawi. Hi, Dave. My girlfriend and I are planning marriage this year. We work well together, but I'd like more time to myself in the relationship as well. To practice guitar, pray, read books, plan projects, write a Substack, etc. She gets very nervous when I seek this time. Any advice? Best wishes. I don't have this really very well. Look, women are highly, highly, highly insecure by male hobbies. I am lucky enough to have a wife that isn't made insecure by my hobbies, but it like this is just how women are. They think that they see hobbies as rivals to them. Um how would I do this? One way you could do it is you could schedule a time for yourself every week, like you could put it on the calendar. Now, once kids come along, that's going to be very, very difficult to do. Another way you could do it is if it's something like writing Substack or, well, I don't know if any of the other ones work with this thing, but oftentimes I do my hobbies when my wife is watching TV. My wife really likes watching movies, and I really hate modern movies. So I just like write my blog or try to write my blog or maybe paint a miniature when she's watching movies. That works. Also, if you can present your hobby as a side hustle, like make earn a little bit money from it on the side and go like, this is a side hustle. And here, honey, like we all make this money. Here, I'm taking you out to dinner with the money I made on my Substack or whatever. That is another way to sell your hobbies as something that she's participating in. And like the fourth way is to bring her in on the hobbies. Pray with your girlfriend, read the same book in a book group, do a duet with her, make it so that she co-owns it, right? So one thing I would say is schedule it, co-own it, co-time it, or monetize it. Those are the ways to sell your hobby to your girlfriend. Although, you know, be the manager of the family's time and make sure that she is aware that she's getting time with you that is quality. You know, make sure that you are making her aware that no matter what happens with your hobbies, you're always scheduling time to spend with her. And make her aware of that. If you make her aware that you are deciding to spend time with her, then a lot of her concerns about your hobbies will probably go away. Donald Michaels for $10 USA. Read diversity. I went to a U.S. Service Academy out of high school and signed up for Honor Society. To get in, we were graded out of 15 points, 5 for each grades, essays, and diversity. Needless to say, as a white male from a petite bourgeoisie human farmer class, I get a 1 out of 5. Well, for the diversity section at least. So if you're a white male, the most you can score is basically 11 out of 15. Like you come in on a B, and that's the highest you can possibly get. Oh man, that is insane. US service, that is insane. Oh my God. Wow, that is crazy. And this would be blatantly illegal in any other context. You're just capped out at a B before you even make a mark. Anyway, Society Man for $5 USA. On the subject of Twin Peaks, did you ever see the movie? It was maligned back when it came out, but I enjoyed it very much. I think you mean the movie Fire Walk with Me, and I did skip that one. I thought that the TV series was good on its own, but I did skip Fire Walk with Me. I've seen every other David Lynch movie, but not that one. So sorry, Society. Oh, by the way, it was nice seeing you at our Oregon event. I was hoping to spend more time talking, but I just got caught up in all these other conversations. So maybe in the future. Cool guy for $4 USA. Sorry, Dave. I meant Singing in the Rain instead of It's a Wonderful Life. Did you send another tweet that I missed? I see your one about radical leftists. I do not see your question about It's a Wonderful Life. Okay, but you said, sorry, Dave, I meant Singing in the Rain instead of It's a Wonderful Life. I also predict mass immigration of Venezuelan refugees with this war. I'm a little bit confused about the reference to it. Singing in the I mean, I love both Singing in the Rain and It's a Wonderful Life. They're both great movies, but they're both very, very different movies. They both are feel good movies. They both are they both were released in shortly after the end of World War II. Obviously, It's a Wonderful Life came immediately after World War II. Um, you predict mass immigration of refugees from the war. I so that will be a great test, right? That will be a great test. If Venezuelans go from America back to Venezuela, then the Venezuelan coup will be very much in America's interests. If Venezuelan refugees come from Venezuela to America, that's indicative of the fact that this coup was undertaken from interests that came from outside of America, to say the least. So that is an excellent, excellent test of who's benefiting from the Venezuelan coup. What direction do the refugees go? Do they go back to Venezuela or do they go into America? But that's an excellent litmus test. Haunting Beauty for $5 says, I am optimistic about AI slop. There's so much of it and it's so easy to make that people are starting to have greater appreciation for an alternative, art that is more honest and deeper. Yeah, I'm starting to feel the same way, Haunting Beauty. I'm starting to feel they want a connection. There's a, you know, there's a very simple dialectic that proceeds from this stuff that leads all in the same direction. And although it's not quantifiable, you know it when you see it when it comes to art. And I am encouraged by that at least. Donald Michaels says, it's pronounced asabiya. Well, didn't I say asabiya? Muhammad said asabiya, ethnic partisanship leading to injustice. It was al-Jazali, the pagan ignorance. It was al-Jalia. It was of al-Jalia, the pagan ignorance, and must be abandoned. He is not one of us who fights for the sake of asabiya. Sunan Aban Dawood 5121. Yes, but I am not using it in the way that Muhammad used it. I am using it in the way that Ibn Khaldun used it, the Muslim scholar from, what was it? I can't remember which century it was exactly, but the Egyptian Muslim scholar that said that togetherness is the core of the nomadic strength that it eventually wins out over civilized man in kind of a push and pull between the nomad and the city. And look, I think that this is you can find similar things in Christianity. I'm not saying I look, if you see any Muslim in the modern world, do you think any one of them is not an ethnic partisan? I have never met a single Muslim in my entire life that was not an ethnic partisan. I'm sorry, I haven't. Right? So I'm thinking when Muhammad said this, he meant this in the you can have your ethnic partisanship, but you all have to fight for the same side, which is the Ummah, the body of Islam. So it's very similar to how Christ gave his pronouncements against possessions and against war, that there were exceptions which they would be permissible, but that you overall should aspire to live a life where they would not necessary. And I'd say the same thing about, I mean, do you think I wouldn't love to have all of humanity unified in perfect Christian piety? That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. But that's not achievable. I don't see any way that our modern systems can even survive or humanity can survive without the kind of vitality that's created by, temporal loyalties. And when you take away those temporal loyalties, people don't become universalist saints, they become crude demonic nihilists. And look, if you want to make yourself into a universalist saint, do so. But everyone who's claimed that they're going to destroy temporal loyalties for the broader project of making all humanity into universalist saints have been, full of shit, and they failed at their project to this point, no matter how much money or technology they've pushed into it. Bright Dawn for $5 USA. For some reason, my first message didn't go through. Before my Diocletian's Law comment, I talked about how the pretense of democracy, for all its flaws, works well emotionally. I'm very skeptical about your opposition to it. Well, democracy doesn't exist, and Diocletian would have known that. The pretense, okay, you want You want me to be fine with the pretense of democracy? I love the pretense of democracy. All kings have the pretense of democracy. The problem isn't the pretense of democracy. The problem is the reality of democracy. The problem is that when masses of people can make decisions and not be held accountable for that. And that like real democratic impulse is the problem. Like the Caesar had the pretense of democracy. He was a popularis. He was the champion of the people. It was the Senate was the representatives of the oligarchy at the time. I'm all for the pretense of democracy. That's the good part of democracy. It's the reality of how democratic decisions are actually made that's the problem with democracy. If you can find a way to have the pretense of democracy without the reality of its flaws, I'm game. Donald Michaels, for $3, said the path isn't grasping for an impeccable definition of heritage Americans. It's awakening a sense of ethnic self-preservation in the people that might plausibly claim identity to that label. Uh, yeah, I guess. I mean, like, I think I'm with you there, Donald. The point of heritage American is not to create a specific ethnic group, but to create kind of a direction, to create kind of a mythology around what it means to be American that is distinctly ethnic, and that is not just anyone with a passport, anyone who creates economic GDP that is not an American. Yeah, that is just being a participant in an economic project, and we need to have a deeper sense than just that. And so I think that, making heritage American be a broad directional label is probably what it needs to be. It opens up all these cans of worms. Who can exactly aspire to be a heritage American? I'm Catholic. And I don't have a single ancestor that I'm aware of that was here before the Civil War. And half of my family wasn't even here before like the 70s or the 60s. Or, well, I guess they were there. My father was here in the 60s, but he wasn't a citizen. So, yeah, there you go. It's that is how people are using it, but it will lead to, there's going to be a larger conversation down the line that is going to have to happen about the details of this vision. Last one, Bright Dawn for $5. My idea is you should analyze the psychological forces that drive our political opponents and try to replace it. What makes a feminist tick? Attention. Spoiler alert, what makes feminists thick or tick, I don't know what you mean. What makes feminists and all women tick is attention and money. If you control the levers of attention and money and validation, you will control how they think. Now, the problem is we do not control that, so we have a hard time controlling that group of people. What makes a John Lennon person tick or thick? Well, again, it's an aspirational vision for how humanity will be in the future. How can we make these people happy and comfortable in the right? Well, I mean, eventually, you're going to be able to convert some to being true believers, but for the most part, it's going to be paying them out in terms of favors, in terms of attention, and in terms of comfort. And you're going to say, we can give you a comfortable life and a secure life, and in exchange, we have political power. That'll be a tough sell in the democratic age for sure, but it is necessary. I don't know. Maybe there's a possibility that as power shifts hands, women will just be attracted to the fact that right-wing men generally have more power than left-wing men of a similar demographic persuasion. And if that's possible, there could be a preference cascade inside white women generally. And women who are, I mean, all women, I like to say all women who are married to white men are white women. Let's be honest here, right? Usha Vance, I really wish you'd convert to Catholicism, but look, you're married to a white man, so you're pretty much white at this point. So it's kind of silly to keep this whole Hinduism thing, because Hinduism is not a very becoming religion for a white woman. Anyway, Cool guy for $4 USA. I bet the boomers and the third worlders will just call themselves heritage Americans and then import 10 million more brownoids to add more heritage Americans. Uh, yeah, I mean, that's you. I mean, look, cool guy, you previsioned one of the many problems that comes with having heritage Americans be kind of a vague aspirational thing. I don't know, man. I think that if you are not in a Christian like religion, a religion that is trying to be very much like Christianity, then you're not really a heritage American. I don't know what to say. The founding fathers wanted this to be a Christian country. Uh, and I don't know how much space there is outside of like I know that there's atheists and agnostics and pagans and I don't know, and I guess like Ushavanch Hindus, like who are like they've married into the culture, they've married into the people. But look, you have to be being part of a Christian culture. None of this Islam or Muslim thing. No 70-foot tall statues of monkey gods. This is insane. And to present like statues of Hanuman as something that our founding fathers would aspire to is just absolutely nuts. It's a living contradiction. And we can't be a people with a contradiction at our core. It is impossible. Kidemporo for $20. Well, thank you very much. A very generous donation for the last one of the day. Dave, I've watched almost all of your VODs for the past 2 years. Loved you since 2021. As a far left aligned insane man, white guy for Harris. Whoa. I envy the OGC and your success with real community. Post left needs something similar. Leftists have caught the mind virus and are boring and obtuse to reality. But I didn't have to go this way. Yeah, I think, look, we have the OGC because we don't have universities and we don't have large NGOs and we don't have people paying us to be leftists. Look, man, I appreciate the fact that you're a leftist, by which I assume you're an economic leftist. Thank you very much for watching this channel. You will be part of our people. We have to make you part of our people. The left cannot form tight fraternal bonds the way the OGC is trying to do. It is not that kind of thing. It used to be that kind of thing. 60 years ago, it could have been that kind of thing. But they've embraced these kind of entropic cultural practices that have essentially created an incentive to break down all tight permanent bonds among people. And so what you're saying is, I wish the left could have an old glory club. You're basically saying that I wish the modern left wouldn't be the modern left. But if the modern left wasn't the modern left, they would be the modern right. Because what determines you as a right-wing or left-wing individual isn't your opinion on government-led healthcare or make work jobs. I'm for make work jobs. What makes you a part of the right is your understanding of human anthropology and morality. And so I don't know. I just think you might, I don't want to be too presumptive, Kidemporal, but you might be a right winger despite your best efforts. So maybe consider not supporting the soulless vampires that rule my state, like our good friend Kamala Harris, who, despite the deficiencies of the Donald, man, she is kind of a scary person. She's kind of a homunculus of sorts, is how I would describe her. But thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate the fact that you watch my videos. I want dialogue even in a post-discourse age. Bright Dawn for $5 USA. To say you'll have a comfortable life strikes me as a doomed idea. It goes against my Diocletian's law idea. Once you get above some basic comforts, people start being driven by emotions more than material comforts. Well, yeah, this is what makes the problem partially impossible. But if they are driven by emotions, we can manipulate the emotions, because power in the long term will manipulate emotions. So we might be able to save ourselves despite ourselves. Okay, I finally got to the end of the super chats, and at the end of my voice. Wait, I didn't want Psalm 8, I want Psalm 9. Okay. Oh, that's way too long. Okay. Psalm 10, how about? Are all of these that's a little bit more reasonable. Okay, guys, the psalm today is Psalm 10. Why standest thou afar, O Lord? Why hidest thou thyself in times of trouble? The wicked in their pride doth persecute the poor. Let them be taken in the devices that they have imagined for others. For the wicked boasteth in his heart's desire, and blesseth the covetous, whom the Lord abhors. The wicked, though the pride of his countenance, will not seek after God. God is not in all his thoughts. His ways are always grievous. Thy judgments are far above his sights. As for all his enemies, he puffeth at them. He hath said in his heart, I shall not be moved, for I shall never be in adversity. His mouth is full of cursing and deceit and fraud. Under his tongue is mischief and vanity. He sitteth in lurking places of the villages. In the secret places doth he murder the innocent. His eyes are privy and set against the poor. He lieth in wait secretly as a lion in his den. He lieth in wait to catch the poor. He doth catch the poor when he draweth them into his net. He coucheth and humbleth himself so that the poor may fall by his strong ones. He has said in his heart, God has forgotten. He has hidden his face. He will see it. He will never see it. Arise, O Lord, O God, and lift up thine hand. Forget not the humble. Wherefore doth the wicked contemn God? He has said in his heart, Thou wilt not require it. Thou hast seen it, for thou beholds all mischief and spite, and requited by his hand. The poor committeth himself to thee, and thou art the helper of the fatherless. Break thou the arm of the wicked and of the evil man. Seek out his wickedness till thou find none. For the Lord is king forever and ever. The heathen will perish out into this land. Lord, thou hast heard the desire of the humble. Thou wilt prepare thy heart. Thou wilt cause thine ear to hear. To judge the fatherless, the oppressed, that man of the earth may no more oppress him. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me for this latest Fiddler's Green podcast, number 68. I wish you luck in the coming year of 2026. Have a wonderful rest of